The conference this year is focused on the path to sustainable farming. There are two huge challenges for the sector at present, and they relate to primary producers, farmers. The first is the transition in the current support schemes that could have a significant future effect on farm businesses. The second is the environment and sustaining this, both in terms of limiting greenhouse gas emissions and also preserving and enhancing the biodiversity and natural capital.
Her Majesty's Government will now invest and support farmers to improve the environment, improve animal health and welfare, and reduce carbon emissions.
So we're focusing on this because it is absolutely key to everything. Sustainability isn't just one person's problem, it's all of our problems.
So sustainability is really important to all businesses, but that can look different, and the route that farmers take to get there will be different for everybody.
We are quite a long way down the path as far as sustainable farming is concerned. There are still some big gaps there, and I think that's where Agri-Tech can come into play.
So to be able to do that, we really do need to have the precision Agri-Tech developed to help improve that sustainability.
And at the end of the day, everybody needs a farmer 3 times a day. Breakfast, lunch, supper, tea. So that's not going to go away. We could be a hell of a lot more efficient than what we are at the moment and stop all this importing of food from further afield. We're under pressure at the moment from transport, fossil fuels, the list goes on and on and on.
I see there's loads to do. It's understanding your ecosystem, your soils, what's possible, what's not possible, trying to evolve and improve and leaving things better than we found them.
Sustainability is about farmers being more collaborative, so the arable men are going to really need to look at the livestock guys, use cover crops, use catch crops, all these things for the health of their soils.
A huge part of the future and a vital step is improved data management and collection, more targeted applications of inputs, say fertilisers, pesticides.
Can we get some of this data joined up? It's no good getting this information if you can't interpret and make use of it. If we can utilise that better, that's a big win for the whole industry and resources as well.
First of all, there's a mindset change, isn't there? Like actual people sitting down and sort of changing, I should be farming this way differently, or I should be farming considering other things.
In order to deliver technology to the farmers, it's key to listen to them.
We need to keep speaking with the people who are developing all this technology.
Because only with their feedback, we will be able to help them reduce the complexity in their day-to-day life.
And there needs to be more communications for practical people on the farm to get their message across and what they want and what they want to see.
I think the key to sustainable farming from a technology point of view is we need to solve the problems of compatibility, connectivity, and interoperability, or on a more down-to-earth level, we just need to make sure that tech is simple and that it is easy to integrate into a farmer's day-to-day life.
And that is the role that Agri-EPI has, and these are some of the areas that we will be addressing at our conference this week.
It's about making agriculture easier for us, managing what we do. If it speeds the process up, if it makes definitive decisions on our budgeting, helps our profitability, sustainability, the environment, it's a win-win situation.
In terms of really catching on, it needs to be financially beneficial, because let's be brave here, farms need to be trading in 5 years' time for you to actually implement any changes to allow you to kind of do more sustainable.
But there's lots of good people doing really good innovative things.
You can't be profitable without investing in environmental areas, and whilst investing in environmental areas allows you to become more financially sustainable also.
We're turning cereals into cattle production. Waste from the cattle is going back onto the arable side, reducing our fertiliser inputs, cover crops, catch crops, green crops for soil health. We're doing lots of good things to get the correct genetics onto the UK farms.
The great thing about Agri-Tech is providing the little tweaks which help us do what we do better.
But we need to do more with regards to coming together within the supply chain.
The key to unlock successful innovation is to bring appropriate parties together and find new ways of making it happen. This conference is a step along the way of this journey.
Agri-EPI will work with farmers and the supply chain and connect with the UK academic brilliance, but also bringing in the Agri-Tech community as well.
We see value in being part of this community because Agri-EPI Centre is one of the key Agri-Tech centres of innovation in the UK, and that helps us to connect with the right partners, farmers, technology providers.
And we work together to solve the real problems for farmers today to bring together sustainability goals.
There are challenges ahead, but I think there will always be solutions that ensure we have a robust and resilient food production capacity, delivering for multiple objectives. I would like to thank our main conference sponsors, Bosch and Nevinex, and also I'm delighted that Tim Mordan, the Deputy Director of DEFRA, is providing our keynote today and will give some really interesting insights in the future in terms of farm innovation for the UK. Good morning, everyone, and a big and warm welcome to the Agri-EPI Centre annual conference. And by all, I mean more than 500. This is a record attendance, and we're genuinely humbled by the interest. The headline theme this year is the path to sustainable farming. It's highly topical, we think, with a backdrop, obviously, of COP26, and all sectors looking at net zero trajectories, including ours, as well as changes to support mechanisms to encourage multiple aspects of sustainability, including greenhouse gas reductions, biodiversity, land and soil improvements, encouraging productivity. There are new initiatives and support mechanisms coming forward to drive these. I'm delighted we have an awards ceremony today led by Steve McLean from Marks & Spencer's, a keynote address from Deputy Director of DEFRA, Tim Mordan, and to follow up a number of panel sessions, which include pioneer farmers, visionary agri-tech specialists, and finally, an expert panel on facilitating ways to take up and deliver change on farm. Finally, I'd like to thank again our conference sponsors, Nevinex, powered by Bosch. I will now hand over to Annabelle, who's anchoring the conference. Over to you, Annabelle.
Thank you so much, Dave. What a great introduction, and welcome to everyone who's joining us today. Such great representatives from across the supply chain. We're in for a really great conference. So I'm Annabelle, and I'll be the moderator for today's session, so I'll be hopefully keeping us all to time. I'll be fielding some of the questions to our panelists, and just a little note to everyone who's attending, please submit in the chat. Let us know where you're attending from and submit any questions through there. We'll do our best to get through any questions and answer them afterwards. So we're going to be live with panel sessions right through from now until 12, and then the conference platform will be open for networking and also viewing some of those exhibition booths throughout the afternoon. So without further ado, I'm delighted to formally start the session, and we're very pleased to have Steve McLean here to support the award scheme. So as Head of Agriculture and Fisheries at Marks & Spencer, Steve has a wide range of responsibilities, but over his career, Steve has supported pioneering innovation in the sector, and we are absolutely delighted to have him here today to present. So I'm going to bring him onto screen now.
Good morning, everyone. Can I just say how delighted I am to be able to join, and how delighted M&S is to be able to support the awards. In celebration of the power of innovation, Agri-EPI invited the most forward-thinking small and medium-sized agri-tech companies to enter the first of the Agri-Tech Excellence Awards. We judged against a number of areas, including the impact on productivity, health and welfare, environmental protection and enhancement, and of course, business efficiencies. The focus of the award being the impact on farm. We were looking for technologies that had significant impact on the sustainability on farm, not only on the environment, but technologies that could support profitability and social efficiencies on farm. All areas of vital importance to the future viability and sustainability of farms going forward. British agriculture, as we know, is probably seeing the biggest period of changes in generations, and success will come from embracing new ways of farming, being more meaningful to consumers, and continuing to produce food at the quality in a climate-friendly way. As such, M&S is absolutely delighted to be associated and to support the Agri-Tech Excellence Awards. And I want to recognise and thank the fellow companies who joined me in judging: Barclays, Caputo, Leighton, Syngenta, and in making these awards. Now, as you will know, there were two categories of awards. Category 1 was the Agri-Tech Excellence demonstrated on a UK farm, and Category 2 was the Agri-Tech Excellence demonstrated on an international farm based outside of the UK. So we're going to start the awards in reverse order with the International Award. And when we viewed the applications in October, all the judges were blown away with the quality, the number, and also the difference in the technologies that were entered. And we interviewed 6 excellent companies for the category. And I'm very conscious in any award ceremony, we always recognise the guys that were right at the front. But we all felt that the awards were very close in both categories this year. And I think that's a credit to the companies involved. So without further ado, we're delighted to announce that the winner of the International Award is Agri-Tech. So my congratulations to Agri-Tech. It was very close, and we wanted to highlight a runner-up who had an exceptional technology, Y-Cow. Now, Y-Cow is a smart, state-of-the-art early warning and health tracking technology for cattle, and we felt a technology of great significance for the future. In the UK category, it was great to see British technology developed that is actually having a real and meaningful impact on farm now, as well as the opportunities for the future. The competition in this category was extremely close, and a fair bit of debate took place before we concluded that the winner of this category is Pruex. So congratulations, Pruex, on that win. There is a runner-up in this category, and there's also a special highly commended. The runner-up was a company called Agri-Tech Solutions. It's a UK startup company with a novel patented technology that creates an industrial disinfectant from water on farm and low voltage electricity. So congratulations, Agri-Tech, on that runner-up award. As I said several times, the competition was tight, and the judges agreed unanimously that we should award a special highly commended in this category too. And that goes to Taylor Technologies and their Rumex technology. The technology allows grassland farmers control pervasive weeds without harming non-weed species and grass crops. This company will definitely be one to watch. Finally, on behalf of all the judges, can I thank Agri-Tech for inviting us to judge? We all thoroughly enjoyed it. And can I thank all of those who entered the competition? We were very much inspired by the innovation, saw some great technologies, and it gave us great confidence that the agricultural industry is in safe hands going forward, as we need to innovate to be meaningful, relevant, and sustainable for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve, for those excellent words, and also just highlighting those brilliant companies. We were delighted to have them involved in that award. So thank you very much, Steve. So now we are delighted to move over to our keynote address now. So we are absolutely thrilled to have Tim Mordan, who is the Deputy Director of DEFRA, to provide our keynote talk for today. So there have been significant challenges in our sector throughout the pandemic, and I believe Tim has been central to dealing with those issues, supporting ministers directly. We are honoured that Tim has cut out time to be with us, both for the keynote and also joining us later in the panel sessions. We may squeeze in some questions as well after Tim's keynote address, so please listen closely to his talk. Tim, over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Annabelle, and thank you, Dave, for your introduction as well. That was amazing and quite inspiring. So good morning, everyone, and it's great to have so many people attending this conference. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and thanks very much for inviting me. I'm absolutely humbled to be in such august company, and thanks to Agri-EPI for organising it. As Dave said in his introduction, you know, the title of this conference is Path to Sustainable Farming, and the timing is brilliant in the just on the eve of COP26 in Glasgow next week, where all our minds have been really focused on climate change, and we all know that agriculture, producing the food that we eat every day, is always in the headlines. There are a couple of things that Dave said in his introduction that really struck me. One was about working together. We'll be talking about Agri-Tech, we'll be talking about WYSI equipment and kit, and that's really exciting, really important. But when all's said and done, it comes down to people. Farmers are people, even civil servants are people. And it's important that we work together to in what can be a quite fragmented landscape to really try and get the best out of British agriculture. And the other thing that struck me was that farming often comes under criticism for on various fronts, but I always find that conferences like this really do emphasize how brilliant we are in this country when it comes to putting food on our plates. And we often think that everyone around the world is doing better than us, but when it comes to Agri-Tech, for example, I'd say that we're world leaders and in many respects setting the pace. So on to my presentation, and if we could have the first slide up, please. I was just going to give a fairly broad outline of what the future farming policy looks like. So on the if you go to the next slide, they're the sort of four key themes. I mean, there is so much going on really as we move out of the EU regime to doing our own agricultural policy, that I couldn't possibly do it justice in 10 or 15 minutes or so. But these are the key themes that I'll be touching on. So I'm sure you're familiar with this. We have our farmers produce world-class food, and we export it around the globe. And our farmers are also stewards of the countryside. They manage landscapes in which we derive clean water to protect us from natural hazards such as flooding. But what we wanted to do as the government left the EU was make sure that farmers were properly rewarded for the environmental goods that they provide. So this is at the heart of what we're doing really. It's using public money to reward environmental benefits. Sometimes you've probably heard the phrase public money for public goods. That's what it's all about. We want a thriving, self-reliant and resilient farming sector that's up there with the best in the world. A trusted and productive relationship between farmers and government, which we know hasn't always been the case, and world-class animal welfare standards and a thrive. And I think they're the key elements that we really want to deliver as we leave the EU. So if we go to the next slide, and I'll just say something about the agricultural transition. So this is as we move away from the EU to the new regime. We want to support farmers and land managers to do these things really: improve the environment, improve animal health and welfare, reduce carbon emissions and store more carbon, and support the resilience of our agriculture and ecosystems, and make business sustainable. And we use the sustainable word quite loosely across government and industry, but obviously we mean sustainable in economic terms, making it profitable, resilient, but also environmentally resilient. And when we started this process of consulting with a wide range of industry stakeholders on what a new agricultural regime should look like, in earnest, it was started in 2018 with the consultation document called Health and Harmony. There's mixed views about how we should transition to a new regime. There were plenty of people who were saying, don't prolong it, just stop subsidies in their current form, do it overnight, kind of rip the plaster off quickly, and let's get on with it. But equally, there were others who were saying, well, farming needs to plan, needs to be ready. It's a long-term business anyway when it comes to business decisions. So the transition needs to be over a number of years. And ministers agreed that the changes will be phased in from 21 this year to 27. And if we move to the next slide, please. There are quite a lot of elements to the new agricultural regime, but one that probably gets most of, a lot of the spotlight is the environmental land management, ELM, where the idea is that farmers and land managers will be rewarded for doing these things that you can see on the slide. So that's, again, these are the kind of public goods that we were talking about earlier. So this is, to do with water, air, mitigation of environmental hazards, adaptation to climate change, thriving plants and wildlife, and just protecting the beauty heritage that we all enjoy in this country. And obviously, over the last 19 months or so, have been enjoying even more as we've haven't been able to travel beyond these shores for holidays. So, and they're things that we all take for granted. Then on the next slide, I've just set out a bit more detail. I mean, there's obviously loads and loads of detail on if you go to gov.uk, but really these are the three main pillars of ELM. The first one is about sustainable farming incentive. So these are sort of straightforward, simple actions that can achieve these environmental outcomes that we're after. They're the sort of starting blocks, really. Then the next tier up is local nature recovery, which are locally targeted environmental goals. And again, for local nature recovery, we're really trying to encourage collaboration, which the feedback we had was that the industry isn't always good at collaborating. So we want to try and encourage more of that. And then the third tier is for is landscape recovery, which is about bigger landscape and ecosystem recovery, and they're much larger projects. Then if we move on to the next slide, I've just set out some of the other things that we're doing. This isn't an exhaustive list by any means, and there's so much I could say on each of these, but to help farms transition, there's a suite of, and landowners transition, there's a suite of measures that we're in the process of introducing. So there's a farming investment fund. I think some of you will be familiar that there was a grant scheme under the old RDPE EU regime. So what we've done is try to take the best bits of that and get rid of the worst bits of the old EU regime and come up with a grant scheme that will provide small grants on a fairly easy to apply basis, and larger grants as well. And you'll hear more about that hopefully in the next few weeks, because if all goes according to plan, we'll be able to launch one or both of those rounds fairly soon. And then one of the bits of feedback that came through very clearly was that there are plenty of farmers who just need a bit of advice and time to adapt to the new regime. So we've rolled out a farm resilience fund where farmers can receive bespoke advice on how to make the right business decisions to respond to the challenges and the opportunities of the new world. Then we also are introducing something called an animal health and welfare pathway, which is quite an ambitious vision to transform health and welfare of farmed animals in England through livestock industry, vets, retailers, NGOs, and government all working together. And the pathway comprises really three elements. The first is about improving performance and compliance to improve the health and welfare baseline. The second is backing farmers with publicly funded schemes that will deliver health and welfare enhancements. And the third is about stimulating trade for farmers, therefore giving greater certainty to consumers and the people who produce livestock. Then we know that slurry management is an issue, so we will be in due course announcing something about money grants to help with slurry investment. And another big bit of feedback we got from this consultation that I mentioned earlier in 2018 was about how we get more talent and into the into the industry. So we're not necessarily talking about young people. It's obviously we want new blood, young people into the industry, but it could be people come from other industries. But it's really about how we get new talent into the industry, and we're working on that. We've been doing some co-design with a brilliant group of farmers and landowners and other people with an interest to come up with some ideas of how we can do that. But I have to say it's not easy, actually. And we need further help from the industry on trying to finesse what we've already got so far. Then so getting to the heart of what we're talking about today, innovation, research and development. That's at the heart of what we're going to talk about. So I've got a slide on that in a minute. Then there was a couple of other bits of feedback we had from the consultation about what people want to see in the future. One was about skills. The feedback we had, and especially from the agricultural colleges that we visited, actually, they said, well, we want farming to be regarded as a professional, worthwhile, dynamic, exciting career, and that's not necessarily the case at the moment. So we worked with industry, and the industry came up with a proposal to create an Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture. So it's TIA, the Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture, which is being formed at the moment. Again, more about that early next year. Industry initiative, brilliant, doing lots of ambitions, lots of interest, virtually unanimous agreement that it's long overdue, and the government was very happy to put in huge amounts of money to get this started and get it underway. So that's really exciting. And then we're also looking at supply chains. This is really about fairness in the supply chains. It's not the stuff you've been reading about in the news just recently about labour shortages. It's about fairness in the supply chains and how we can make sure that the margins are spread evenly across the supply chain. Then if we move on to the next slide, which is about innovation. So in partnership with UKRI, we're encouraging farmers, growers, foresters, and any other businesses to get involved in ambitious industry-led research and development. So the key words there were industry-led. So we have absolutely world-class, fantastic research establishments across the country that we know are doing brilliant work, and they're always being reported on the national media and the farming media about all the wonderful things we're doing. There's lots of interest globally in what these organisations are doing. But some of the feedback we had was, well, that's great, but farmers feel that sometimes the money isn't always being spent on the things that they really want. So we're just trying to encourage more sort of bottom-up, farmer-led collaboration. So the three themes there: industry-led R&D partnership fund. This is the first of 3 new funds to launch under the sort of whole banner of Farm Innovation Programme, which is designed to support ambitious R&D, and it builds on previous investments in innovation and a strong partnership with UKRI. And you can find more about this online if you just go on to farminginnovation.ukri.org. It'll all be there. That's currently open for applications at the moment. It's very exciting, and that opened just recently. So and then we've got in early next year Farming Futures R&D fund, which is driving more fundamental R&D into strategic and sector-wide challenges. And then the third element is Accelerating Adoption Fund, and this is quite interesting actually, and I'm really excited about this area because one of the bits of feedback we had from farmers when we did the consultation in 2018 was that a lot of them, especially some of the maybe older generation, said, well, we used to have ADAS and we used to have money for via the experimental husbandry farms and horticulture stations to try new things and trial new things, and that's all disappeared. And we'd just like a bit of help there. So that's really what the Accelerated Adoption Fund is all about. It's smaller scale, agile projects, as we're calling them, to trial on farm technology, new ideas, and so on. So that's really exciting, and you'll hear more about that in due course. I could say a bit more about all these, but I think I'll wind up and just go to the last slide, which is just a self-explanatory slide about how you can get involved. So we're doing lots of stakeholder workshops, working with farming organisations. We're doing pilots. We're doing consultations. There's lots of the most, of course, that's all the formal stuff. The most valuable thing that we find in DEFRA is getting out on farms, talking to real farmers, talking to landowners, contractors, the organisations, colleges that do, and research establishments that do all this wonderful R&D. And you can sign up there if you wanted to follow more about what we're doing. So I think I'll pause there. Annabelle, that's virtually 15 minutes. If there is time for a question or two, I'd be very happy to take it. If not, then we can discuss it later on at the panel session.
Yes, I think, well, first of all, Tim, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. Given the nature of the time today, we'll be joining you later on in the panel session for any questions. But thank you, Tim. We really appreciate your excellent presentation. So thank you very much. All right, then. So I'm now going to go across to our first panel session, which is focusing on the farmer voice. And we are going to go across to that session now.
Good morning and welcome to our first panel session. I'm delighted to be hosting our panel session with our satellite farmers across the country, and I think we're joined by all four of them. We've got them on my screen. This morning we're starting with talking about different farming systems but shared goals, and what do those goals mean for the guys that are doing the real jobs on the farms. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce a presentation from Tim because I think it aligns to a lot of what we're going to talk about and discuss this morning. I'm not going to spend too much time talking because we want to get into the real conversation. This conversation about sustainable goals, farming, what can farmers do, happens all the time, every day at Agri-EPI, and it's a great pleasure to get four of our pioneering farmers, I think this is what we've been headlined to death this morning, and get a bit of a chat about what's going on, and we welcome questions as we go through. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, a bit of a intro of where you're from in the country and kind of what your goals are, but we'll keep it light and we'll get into the heavy questions in a moment. So I'm going to jump over to John first, a bit of a where you're from and what you do, but I'm sure you don't need much of an introduction from me, essentially.
Thank you, Claire. I'm John Pawsey. I farm just 8 miles south of Bury St Edmunds, Suffolk. We farm about 650 hectares of our own land and around about 850 hectares for other people in the local area. We're organic. We grow a mixed range of crops, and we have 1,000 New Zealand Romney sheep.
Thanks very much, John. Jake, can you go next, please?
Thank you, Claire. Yes, Jake Freestone. I'm the farm manager at Overbury Enterprises, which is on the Gloucestershire-Worcestershire border, other side of the country from John. And there we're a mixed farm, arable and sheep. We're a leaf linking environment and farming demonstration farm. And really passionate about how we can provide sustainable food in a system that enhances the environment at the same time. So combinable crops, a little bit of land let for vegetables, a higher tier stewardship scheme, and a ewe flock as well that's running permanent grass and some grass lays as well.
We'll jump back to the side of the country with Rob. We've got Rob, have we?
Hi there, I'm Rob Hodge. We're good. My name's Rob Hodgkins. I farm in partnership with my wife Jo. We farm just north of London, so sort of Stevenage, Hatfield, Baldock area. It's farms about sort of 650 hectares of arable and about 400 hectares of grass, running sort of 200 or 2,500 New Zealand Romneys, and it's all tenanted. So we sort of started with 200 ewes about 7 years ago and built the farm up from there.
Andy, can I invite you into the stage?
Yeah, good morning all. So I'm the northerner, probably the southerner to those Scottish people that we've got on the call today, but I'm based in Macclesfield in Cheshire. We're dairy farmers, farm together with my family. There is 330 all year round cows plus young stock. We supply the co-op, work very closely with the co-op supermarket and one of the farmers on their farming committee. We're all year round calving system, and I suppose our focus is all about trying to make the best use of grass. So at the minute we're supplying about 2.3 million litres into the co-op on an annual basis. Milk is my passion, along with marketing. A couple of years ago I set up a campaign called Mission for Milk, all about promoting the health benefits of milk, and I suppose alongside the farm I also run a rural and agri-marketing business called Hills Green.
So as you can see, we've got wonderful diversity across just these four businesses, and that how do we all achieve different goals? We've listened to Tim talk about what DEFRA want to work with us to achieve, and that it needs to be industry led. So how are you guys kind of working through changes in advice? And I suppose I'm going to jump straight into a big question more about technology. Is what's the motivation in your business to use new technology, and how does that work in terms of your future looking for where your business is going to go to? I'm going to, Andy, if it's all right, I'm going to start with you on that one, technology, where you're going.
Yeah, no problem. I suppose I'm a bit of a data geek and love technology. If you ask the guys on the farm, I'm probably best kept in the office rather than milking the cows and driving the tractors. But we've got to all play to our strengths, haven't we? So I suppose over the last few years, 5-6 years, my focus is about how we can use technology on farm to improve the efficiencies and what we're doing. We've got a number of different systems that we've implemented. All of the cows have got ID collars on, so we're tracking individual feed allocations, milk meters to track their yields. We've got something called SMAX-Tech, which is a bolus which sits inside the cow's rumen, monitors temperature, so alerts us to any sick cows, when cows are on heat, when they're about to calve. So as these systems are growing, we've got to make sure we've got the finger on the pulse and really picking up on these issues earlier. So that's a good system. We've got things like a silage pusher robot, which is obviously there to increase feed intakes and ultimately yield. So everything we're doing on farm is looking at how we can either make the job easier, and I suppose more enjoyable for the guys working on the farm, but looking at how we're able to improve efficiencies and then ultimately profitability.
I'm gonna go, it's like pick a mix, where'd I go next? I'm gonna go to John actually, because you've got an organic system. So how does that work when you transition it over into an organic system, and what's your priority when you're looking at technology for your business?
Yeah, it's really interesting because when we first converted 20 years ago, I think we were one of the first farms to do sort of field scale inter-row hoeing cereals on a sort of large scale, working with Garford at the time. And so understanding how technology can help us deal with the problems that we used to deal with chemicals in the past, I suppose, has always been quite a strong driver for us. But increasingly, I suppose, and I'm sure this is going to be the same for everyone, is that really understanding where value is on our farms. And that's in terms of quality, and through Agri-EPI, we've got the protein meter on our combine, but also really understanding where the productive areas are on our farm, and of course all that's all linked to profitability. The weeding thing also, as the technology has improved as far as weeding is concerned, but also looking at robotic weeding, it will mean that we will be able to disturb the soil less, because in an organic system where you can use no herbicides at all, there is some soil disturbance to deal with certain weeds, and sort of a zonal tillage sort of approach to deal with taprooted weeds or whatever aspect the weed has to sort of cling onto the soil, and you've got to try and get rid of it. So I think technology in the future will really help us with that, and that's something to be quite excited about.
Absolutely. And Rob, going over to your system, because you're managing a lot of land over a large area, so how do you bring in tech to that to help you manage some of it and make decisions?
Well, Clark, I guess we're slightly different from. I mean, when we took on the arable loan, HSBC said we were the largest unsecured loan they'd ever given to anyone in agriculture. I think at the time we were just past 90% geared. We managed to knock that down to sort of 70, 80%, and now the bank manager doesn't come every 2 weeks for a review. He sort of leaves it every quarter. And actually, COVID's been now it's sort of pretty much every year, so he tends just to leave us alone. So I guess I'm very unimaginative in my definition of sustainability. I mean, it's just profit driven. We pay full commercial rent for every acre of land we've got. We've got huge HP repayments on combines, tractors, huge livestock loans, and all the livestock. Everything we do just has to be driven by profit. I know that's not terribly fashionable at the minute in terms of wider environmental gains and such. But I think there is a nice sweet point where we're starting to look at inter-row hoeing. We've got ourselves an inter-row hoe with fertilizer prices starting to knock on the door of £700. Looking at doing inter-row clover. We've already done a trial plot on one field of strip tilling straight into a clover field, but had sort of fat lambs rotationally grazed on it for 3 years. We're certainly looking at trying to use the inter-row hoe we've got now, just to sort of start putting bursting clover in between the rows of wheat, and move to a sort of strip till drill to try and accommodate that. So yeah, it's a game, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, you've recently been celebrated for your work in this area on sustainability. So where are you finding technology? What's your motivation behind using technology, and how are you implementing that?
Yes, we've been driven by the technology kind of ideas for a number of years. I suppose we started off back in 2006 when we looked at guidance, and we retrofitted a lot of steering equipment onto our cultivation tractors and drill tractors back there in the time. Then went on to variable rate sort of fertilizer applications. So we were looking at efficiency in terms of output in the field, cost reduction. Rob's right, profit at the end of the day. If we're not, farming and making money, then the rest actually goes by the wayside. And we've gradually sort of moved on from that point. So we need to be definitely more efficient. We need to be using our input costs to maximise their efficiency. I had an interesting statistic this morning on the radio. Anglia farmers are saying that agricultural inflation between 20 and 21, September 20 to September 21, is running at 22%, which is a frightening jump in terms of the costs that we are now incurring to grow crops and look after livestock, fuel, energy. Rob's just mentioned fertilizer. So we need to look at all these different technological gains to try and sort of stay still really on what we're actually trying to achieve. So we've moved on from the guidance to satellite imagery. Agri-EPI has helped us out a lot with our livestock in terms of some handling equipment and weighing and shedding equipment. Crop scanner like John to look at different protein levels in milling wheats across the fields, malting barley levels. And we're actually working with Precision Decisions to actually get all that layered up now so that we can look at sort of nitrogen protein offtake maps, which is the next bit. And I think that's a huge challenge as we're gathering so much data. It's actually how we deal with it and how we can use that data to drive better decision making. And I think that is a huge challenge that we face in the industry.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the fact that you're talking about how do we share that data, and Tim mentioned earlier about that relationship between government and farmers, but it's not just government, is it, that you're having to collect that data to be able to share and collate it to be able to kind of progress forward through supply chains as well. Is there anything, I know you're all very integrated into supply chains, how are you working alongside your partners in the supply chain to collate that data and really make an impact, not just to the environment, but to productivity? I'm going to go back to Jake on that as well, because I know you have done some work there.
Yeah, so we sort of work quite closely with Molson Coors for our malting barley. They use 100% British barley in Carling, so it's a great brand to sort of get behind. And we're doing quite a lot of work with them. We had a steering group meeting yesterday actually about sustainability, and they are now starting to be questioned by their customers about their supply chain and the sustainability of that supply chain in terms of sort of nitrogen use, biodiversity benefits, so net carbon zero. All of these challenges are being customer driven. So at the end of the day, we are being asked to provide the information for our sort of processors, I suppose, to be able to hand that on to the ultimate consumer at the end of the day. So I think with the challenges that are coming our way, we need to have more sort of joined up supply chain collaboration really, so that we can actually try to maximize the benefits back to the farm gate. So there are various different ways to do that. I mean, carbon and biodiversity could be another income stream down the line in the future. But I think good supply chain commitment, good contacts, good conversation, understanding the pressures and the challenges of different seasons, I think that's also important. And you only get that with long-term relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, on the dairy side, how does that work? How are you sharing information and using tech to be able to collaborate better within the supply chain?
Yeah, very similar to what Jake was saying. I mean, ultimately, we're all governed by the end consumer and their wants. So, like I say, we supply the co-op, and a lot of the changes that they're making and how they work with their farmers are driven by what the consumers are telling them that's going to make them want to come into their stores. So there's a number of different areas in terms of data on farm that the co-op now want to know about, mainly from a PR angle, that if there is anything in the press, that they can stand up and be very confident in terms of what their suppliers and their farmers are doing, whether that's from an environmental point of view, whether it's in terms of, say, lameness on farm or anything to do with calf rearing, etc. They've got the data to back that up. I think the biggest challenge within farming is there is so much data, and what it's a challenge and it's an opportunity. I suppose what Jake was saying there, in terms of if we've got the data there, we can make better decisions on farm, which will ultimately help improve profitability and efficiency. But because there is so much, it's all in various different guises, everything from sort of pen and paper to spreadsheets to apps to desktop to on iPads or whatever, on machinery. And I think what we really need is to try and bring that data together. I know there's businesses like Map of Ag that are trying to do that sort of thing, but from a co-op perspective, we collect the data, we have to input it to the co-op, we also have to send it to Muller, we also need to provide the data in a different way to Red Tractor, and there's a lot of repetitive data input there. In terms of to improve farming efficiencies and to help the overall supply chain, is there's got to be much better joined up thinking and a joined up way of managing this data.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob, on a different angle to this as well, you're looking at your breeding programs and trying to, how do you enhance that data and make change happen, isn't it? So did you explain that how you're wanting to take that forward in an industry which perhaps hasn't been so data driven?
Yeah, sure. So on the sheep side, we're doing some fairly interesting stuff with genomic prediction work. So we routinely DNA shepherd about 500 ewes a year out of the 2,500. That's it's basically like a posh version of Jeremy Carl. We just take DNA samples from all the lambs and try and work out who the dad and who the mum actually is. From that, we can then use a sort of, a bit like Jake, but probably not as flash. We've got sort of computers that go on weighers and that sort of stuff. That takes data on lamb rates, and then we take information from number of lambs born from the ewes. Again, take DNA samples from the ewes, not just the parentage, so we can work out what particular gene sets are switched on. We've now got access to about 26 different traits, everything from parasite resistance, wool yield, meat yield, lamb growth, that kind of stuff. That's all done in a laboratory in the US, which we then send to a computer system in New Zealand, where our Romneys are benchmarked across a worldwide population of Romneys. So that's quite nice. Whereas traditionally in England, I guess, or UK, certainly people tend to be fairly insular and only benchmark themselves against, their sheep, if you like. So that the Clin Society, for example, would only benchmark themselves against other Clins in a particular region, whereas we tend to benchmark our sheep across crossbreed analysis across sort of sheep in Australia, New Zealand, UK, Argentina, and Brazil, I think, are all sort of featured on that analysis. So we try and give ourselves a bit more of a worldwide perspective, just to really see how poorly I'm doing, rather than just locally.
I just kind of then transfer it to John, because you have been through that kind of process of progressing a new supply chain and developing your organic business. How do you kind of start that process of influencing the supply chain to make sure it works for the business in terms of data and empowering those decisions through kind of science and facts rather than free market?
I think it's a really interesting question. Actually, I've been listening to everyone else and thinking, actually, we're doing relatively a small amount of that with our customers, because actually with the organic thing, because we're inspected yearly and the regulation is governed within European and UK law, is actually that is the driving force behind that is the organic movement, in inverted commas, I suppose. And so when people buy organic, they're making several assumptions backed up on the kind of farming systems that we have to adopt and legally adopt to do what we do. And so it's really interesting hearing the other speakers, because in fact we are increasingly, people are wanting that data, and certainly we supply oats to white oats, and they're getting increasingly interested in the sort of kind of relationship in terms of data, but also environmental data about what we're doing and actually how that can fit into the way that they're selling their product. But I think because of that sort of overarching sort of organic sort of label, people are buying into that rather than buying into the specific nuances. Because I think there's a perception that that organic regulation is actually delivering on terms of environmental enhancement and sustainability. I mean, that's up for debate. But at the end of the day, that's probably why I'm listening to others and thinking, actually, why are we not doing more of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it changes over time, doesn't it, in terms of how the market matures and where the customer is going. So it's something that's never set in stone. I mean, nothing in agriculture ever is set in stone, is it?
But I agree, and I think interestingly, and certainly talking to Jake in the past, is that because the two systems, and you're talking about sort of regenerative agriculture and organic, are getting closer and closer. Certainly, the organic sort of label has probably got a bit of a challenge on its hands in the way that we've got to. And here's me thinking, gosh, I'm not doing much of that because actually I'm hiding behind this label. But actually, do you know what? We've probably got to up our game a little bit. Sounds a bit scary.
I'm going to take that opportunity to dive into a little bit about soil, because the conversations I've had with you guys in the past before when we start talking about soil just absolutely fascinates me, and I hope everybody else is on board with it. 5 minutes on soil, but we've talked about this before. You've all got different systems, but soil's one of your greatest assets, and your approach to going into whether it's a regenerative system or it's monitoring or thinking more about carbon, you've all got slightly different targets, but the route and the processes that you're going through are quite different. And Andy, I'm sorry, I've not got into that debate with you before about how do you look after soil and how do you maintain that kind of health of the soil for the future. But I don't know if we can take a moment to kind of discuss. John, I'll go to John first, because you are the organic hardcore.
Well, I think it's really interesting. I mean, we've been, one of the reasons for going organic 20 years ago was concerns about what we were doing to our soil, and of course, technology and drills and cultivators and blah 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 was all very different then, and probably relatively old school compared to the kind of things that we're using today. But we are doing. I come from the sort of Gary Zimmer sort of approach where we're doing sort of zonal tillage. We're doing tillage where we have to do it to deal with the specific problems that we have. So there's no sort of blanket sort of system that we use to do in every single field. And all I can tell you is that over the 20 years with doing cultivation, but also crucially including 1 to 2 to 3 year lays plus green manures, is that our soil is getting healthier. We're building up soil organic matter. I think it's a bit of a misnomer, to a certain extent, the sort of organic sort of too much tillage sort of kind of approach, because it's a systems-based approach. What else are you doing? And in my view, it's got much more to do with the building up soil organic matter through livestock and longer lays and longer rotations, rather than getting too caught up in what is the sort of ultimate way that you treat soils. What I'm absolutely certain of is that never in the history of agriculture has been a single system, a simple single system that works every single year for a couple of decades. The wheels fall off when you make something too simple. The wheels do fall off at some point.
Yeah, and that's absolutely it, isn't it? It's the system has to be bespoke to the farm, to the time, to the moment, and what needs to be done and the challenges that are there. And that's really where we need technology companies to be able to help and manage those really difficult, sensitive decisions that need to be made pretty regularly on a farm. And
can I just say, and I absolutely, and so I caveat all that by saying that we do want to be doing less tillage, because obviously I understand what tillage does. And I think actually combining sort of broad acre inter-row hoeing, but also then using robots to get in between the rows probably would be a way forward where we could do less tillage.
So Andy, I'm going to jump over to your side. How do you manage that with the dairy? How does soil kind of integrate into your management decisions?
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer with farming. You need to look after your assets, and they'll look after you, whether that's from animals' perspective in terms of really focusing on animal health, and they'll be much productive, better animals for you, or whether it's in terms of the land and the soil. And as we've all discussed, that is one of the big assets that we have, and it can make a massive impact on the performance of your business in terms of how well you're looking after that soil. I think as farmers, we've tried to, I suppose, grow the businesses driven by consumers wanting cheap food. We've had to, I suppose, really hammer on natural assets and soil, and it, particularly at the minute, there is a lot of focus on regenerative agriculture, and actually what we need to be doing more in the future to make sure that we actually look after our soils. I think from a dairy point of view, in terms of with soil sample every year, the whole farm, we're getting, in terms of utilising technology to make sure that we're applying fertilizers only when needed. And I think in the future, it's going to actually, I could see our farm having less animals on it, but as using less fertilizer, and I suppose just focusing on, looking after our natural capital, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to maybe push this back to Robin. Kind of, you talked about how it was all about the money and need to make a profit. So as the cost of fertilizers go up, and I know you have done a lot to look after your soils. It's not all inputs, high output. It is really finding that sweet spot of a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'll caveat the whole thing by saying I probably should have Jo here because she's the sort of soil expert. But since we're on holiday, she sat by the pool having a pina colada, and when I asked if she'd come and join us on a conference, well, there's a lady present, so I won't say what she said, but suffice to say, she's still sat by the pool sipping a pina colada. She does, yeah, yeah, absolutely. The very boring profit question has underlined everything we've done. I think if we moved straight to a direct drilling system tomorrow, by the year after, we'd be bankrupt. We just couldn't take the yield loss associated with a straight move to direct drilling. What we have tried to do, much like John, is try to integrate the livestock into the arable system. We sort of tried to move away from the temporary grass lays because they've never been able to compete with a sort of straight, cereal rent. We just couldn't make it work. So we've had to try and be a bit smarter about how we do that. We've moved into grass seed production, trying to get clover seed production contracts, that sort of thing. By using that, we can get one crop of grass seed straight off it, and then chuck the sheep straight on, and they can start doing their thing. Black grass, we're in a big black grass area, so we've sort of had to keep switching from spring cropping to winter cropping, from spring cropping to winter cropping. We've tried to find profitable break crops and try to do them better and well, so they actually are profitable rather than just loss making. Most of the ground has a cover crop put into it on which the sheep graze. Probably 90% of everything we combine is chopped. Sort of 10% we sell for straw, and that pays for me to sit here. That's our little bonus to ourselves, if you like. That just pays for the holiday for us and the kids. It's a very difficult balancing act, like you say, Claire. I wouldn't say, every year is different and every system's different. We've gone from a sort of plough based, we've got a plough in a rotation. We sort of switched straight away to a min-till system with a top down and sort of trying to do it that way, followed by a Valderstad rapid. We've done that for about 3 or 4 years, and that's been very successful just in trying to sort of start reducing cultivations. This year we've switched to a Missouri, and we sort of started strip tilling. So I think we've probably got another 5 to 8 years of that just to carry on getting the soil in a reasonable condition. And I think then we'll probably make the jump to a direct drill system if and when the soils are ready for it. But unfortunately, we've just got the soils are heavily depleted over many years of intense farming, and it just takes a lot of time, a very gentle approach to try and make sure, move the soil organic matter up, move the soil in a condition where it's friable and healthy enough to sustain a direct drilling system, without taking that big yield sort of hit and go that way.
Awesome. I'm gonna go over to Jake, and I hope he doesn't mind this question, but you've got quite a diverse mix of crops in your rotation, and I know you have got some veg in there. How do you manage that balance? And I suppose it's kind of then moving a wee bit more onto that productivity, profitability, and sustainability. How do you find that balance in your business?
Yeah, it's quite a challenge actually. But one that we mustn't shy away from, I think, having a bit of land let out for vegetable production is on some of the sand and gravel land, which has been dug over the last sort of 60 years and then reclaimed, has got its own challenges. It does have water, which is quite a big asset in terms of irrigation. But what it has enabled us to do is to work with the vegetable producers that are renting land from us and try and work with them to try and reduce their impact, not just at Overbury, but across some of their other farms as well, in terms of reduced cultivations, just be a little bit smarter about how these crops are established, and that's been a really interesting journey. We let some land out on the hill for hand-picked peas, and historically that was ploughed, then it was top down, and now we're direct drilling those, and have done for the last sort of 4 or 5 years probably. So it has been a sort of slow transitional process. We still need a huge amount of vegetable production in the UK. We import so much of it, and we don't consume enough of it as individuals. So in terms of opportunity, if we can continue to grow veg, but in a more sustainable, less impactful way, and some of that is education, some of that is what the consumer expects at the end of the day. You know, having a pea with a maggot in it, you know, the whole batch gets discarded, which means they're tied into using insecticides, you know, as and when it's justified. But you know, it's still, you know, it's a whole education process, I think, that we need to go on. So there is that. There's also, I think, a slight imbalance, I think, in the rent that people pay for vegetable land. I don't think it's probably high enough. They're being squeezed at the other end. Totally and utterly understand that by the margins that the supermarkets are trying to constantly reduce the costs of. But actually, when you look at the impact of some of the operations and the negative effect that has on sort of soil health, soil quality, you know, the rent value doesn't really cover that. But in a sort of a regenerative system, I think throughout the rest of the rotation, there are opportunities to build that resilience into the soil. You know, cover cropping before the veg crop, cover cropping afterwards. We've got to be careful with manures when they go on because of the, you know, the sort of the gold plating standard of some sort of gaps that are needed. So you know, it is a bit of a challenge, but there are definitely things that we can do to try and reduce the impact of those crops within the rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's taking on that challenge, isn't it? And it's working together to find, you know, it's not just the land, it's the producer, it's the packer, it's the supermarket as well. So yeah.
And a lot of those challenges, I think, Claire, are engineering challenges. I think the idea that we can't drill salad onions because the drill can't cope with crop residue, well, that's an engineering solution. It's not any other issue at all. It's putting the seed in the ground. The fact that there's a bit of straw in the way that they need to, you know, bale off and then plough under so that the drill can cope with it. These are solutions that are not beyond, you know, the technology of this day and age and engineering skills to be able to invent something. The challenge is it's such a small niche market that it makes it very, very expensive. But if you can do that, you'll use less water, you'll do less damage at harvest, you'll be capturing more carbon or not emitting so much. So there are some huge wins for for everybody in that system.
I think you've led me nicely on to, I think, what will have to be my final question. But like I say, this is a live conversation today, but it happens every day with farmers across the country. And I know a lot of our audience are tech companies looking to work with you guys and really take on some of these big issues and, you know, exciting challenges, actually, if we want to look at it that way rather than seeing it as being problems. So my final question to everyone, well, it's a bit of a big one, is what does the business look like in 5 to 10 years' time, and what are the tech gaps that you want businesses to be looking at to work with you to solve, to overcome these challenges and really find the big opportunities in agriculture? Who do I go with first on that one? Andy, you're smiling, so I'll give it to you.
Thanks, Claire. Wow, what a question. I think, you know, we've got COP26 that's coming up. We're seeing it in, you know, adverts on the TV, on the news. We've talked a lot about it today. The big opportunity over the next 5 years is climate-friendly farming, I suppose, and looking at, you know, how we are improving the environment, becoming more sustainable, reducing our carbon footprint. And I suppose the opportunity there is, you know, becoming more efficient as a farming business, will ultimately reduce your carbon footprint. And I think, you know, those people that I suppose are really, you know, worried about, you know, when we start talking about the environment and, you know, becoming more sustainable, is, you know, it doesn't have to be we're here now and we you know, we're going to the other extreme in 5 years' time. It's what little steps we can start making to do our bit. You know, areas of land that are unproductive, or, you know, just don't quite work for you now, what else could you do in the future and use them for? But I think that, you know, technology can play a big part in, you know, improving efficiencies, and then ultimately profitability. And I think, you know, the big challenge at the minute for me and a lot of other farmers is labour. You know, and it's not saying that technology is going to solve that labour shortage, but in terms of using technology on farm, it can actually make you an attractive place to work. And I think, you know, let's forget about that, you know, it's a workplace at the end of the day as well. And, you know, that's another opportunity to get sort of high quality labour coming onto the farms.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob, how about you? What does the future look like, and what tools do we need to be building to make it better?
Well, actually, rather boringly, I'm going to almost echo exactly what Andy said. Labour for us is a huge problem. I mean, Claire, you've been subject to many of my rants and madcap ideas. I mean, one of the ones we had was about drones going around counting sheep, which was awesome. You know, we have sheep kind of everywhere over a massive radius, 25, 30 miles. If we had a drone that could go around actually counting sheep, that would take a massive amount of work off of our shepherds every day. You know, if I could just come up, send it off at 8 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. But you know, between us, we could find about 3 or 4 manufacturers who wanted to create a jump-in robot that counted how many blackgrass plants you've got, but no one actually wanted to do something that could, you know, do actually some worthwhile work, if you like. You know, if it's blackgrass, I know it's blackgrass. You know, it's there and it's going to be there. But you know, with the high, you know, as the DEFRA chap said earlier, with the continual drive towards higher standards, you know, just for constant monitoring of livestock is going to become more and more important. And there's just nothing out there at the minute that you can do in a profitable way. You know, you load them with sensors, but you know, it's just trying to find that sweet spot, like you say, between affordable technology and being able to sort of cut down your labour inputs a little bit.
Awesome. So we'll put that challenge out there to whoever's watching, who can count Rob's sheep for him. Jake, where's your business going, and what you know, people watching, what do you want them to work with you and build for the future?
Yes, I mean, I can only echo Rob and Andy to a fair degree. I think labour is really, really important. We're looking at more sort of integration of different enterprises on the farm to spread market risk and have different income sources and streams. I think carbon and biodiversity, we mentioned it right at the start. I think those 2 elements are going to be really important as an income source to the farming business, but also a connection to our customers. I think we need to really build on that, and that's why people will in the future want to buy British, is because they are supporting people and rural economies that they can actually see and feel and touch and be part of. So I think we've got a huge job there to continue that communication. I would also want to look at the nutritional status of food that we're producing, and actually try to understand, you know, that extra value in terms of a nutritional quality, and how we can bring that value back to the farmer rather than it being lost in a homogenous, you know, 4,000 ton of milling wheat in a bunker somewhere. And electric fencing or electric free fencing for sheep, I think, would also be probably help Rob out as well, actually. But if we could sort of cell graze sheep at an affordable cost, because we spend a lot of time fencing around arable fields And if we could train them to move, I know the technology's out there for cows. It's £100 a cow or something, which we can't really justify that with sheep. But if we could do that, that would save a lot of legwork for people putting flexible fencing up. So that would be, if one specific ask would be for that one.
We're getting the list. We will work on it. John, and finally, what's your kind of vision for the future, and what should we be working on?
So as far as the sort of farming bit of our business is concerned, and Jake's really alluded to this in his previous answer, but it's about disseminating the data that we've been collecting for years. And if there's lots of tech companies watching, for goodness sake, just please make this stuff talk to each other, because there's no way at the moment of layering all the data that we've been building up over the years and even extracting data for some of our systems to get it into some meaningful form where we can really understand where our farms are productive or profitability or not. From the other side of things, as far as looking at sort of nature recovery and climate change, is I think we're going to be working with the different partners in the future. For the last 20 years plus, we've really been very focused around DEFRA and the RPA. I see that as increasingly a smaller part of our relationships, and I think we're going to have new partners. I think we're going to be working with local businesses. I think we're going to be working with local NGOs, and we're already doing that already, and I know others on the call are doing that, and also stakeholders. So, the Environment Agency, and working with people like that to deliver this massive challenge that we've got. So I think relationships are going to be different, and I think that also makes it a sort of very exciting future for people coming into farming.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank you all for your time today. As always, our conversations are exciting, positive, and really kind of setting out those challenges and working together. And like Tim said, it needs to be industry led, and this is where it starts on the farm. And we've got huge excitement in terms of this system-based approach, looking at labour, looking at data, and looking at the supply chain and where those opportunities are. Thank you so much for your time today. As I say, this is a conversation that's live online today, but it's constantly live. It never ever stops. And just get in touch with us and speak to us about the opportunities. We're moving on to the next session with some of the companies that Agri-EPI are working with to talk about the technology and setting those challenges and what the potential of the tech that is out there and how we can integrate with them better. So thank you very much. And as I say, this is a conversation that keeps going. So send in questions, and we're always delighted to keep the conversation going. Rob, enjoy your holiday. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Claire, for that really, really insightful conversation there, and we've got some great comments coming in from everyone involved in that as well. So we're just going to go to our next panel session now, and we're waiting for our speakers to join us. So we're going to go for our video now to count us down to the next session. Thank you all.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second panel session today. I'm taking over, unfortunately, from Lisa Williams, who's ill at the moment, so best of health to her. Today's panel is on Agri-Tech enabling sustainable farming. I think this is an excellent session to lead on from the previous one with our highly innovative farmers that we have as part of Agri-EPI Centre working with us. got a range of leading agri-tech developers today. We're going to talk about how they are helping to support the innovation we're seeing on farm today. So I hope it's be a really interesting discussion. We're going to get pretty quickly into things. So I'll quickly introduce everyone. So from AGCO, we have Dr. Mark Moore. From Mantle Labs, we have John Pierre. From SmartBell, we have Jose Chitti. From Nevernex, we have Sven, I apologize, Kroshoki.
No worries.
And from Bosch, we have Bharath Jayakumar. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I think we'll get straight into the questions. We have quite a few, and I'll be in trouble if we don't get through them. So question number one is that the big problem, which I think was laid down at the end of the conversation, we were just all listening to, it's around data. As how do we solve the problems of data access and data integration across all the agri-tech solutions available to farmers to enable them to have sustainable productivity? And I think we'll start off with Sven at Nevernex there, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Elliot. First, thanks for being here. It's an honor for us to join you guys, and we are really looking forward for this interesting discussion. Regarding your question, at least we think a key to solve this problem is really to unlock the problem of interoperability we see in the ag machinery market. It's fairly fragmented globally. We got a lot of companies, we got mixed fleets around the world. And what we really need to solve is we need to solve the issue of these machines talking to each other and trying to exchange data between these mixed fleets. And that's actually what we try to do. We try to establish an open and neutral ecosystem where all the machines can talk to each other with our experience we have in talking to machines out of our Bosch background. And I think once we solve this, this will then enable a lot of new technology flowing into the ag business.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very true. Now, the fragmentation is a massive issue. I think that's an issue across all areas, all sectors. So, Jose, I think from your point of view, you're in a slightly different sector in livestock. So, do you have any comments on the same issues in that sector?
Yeah. So it's a very interesting topic. I think there's probably three aspects to tackle in order to be able to do it. So technically, integration is fairly easy, but I think it's about the willingness to do it. And that's more and more you can see that companies have the willing to start integrating their system and collaborating. I think the second thing is probably where Agri-EPI and other larger intercompany bodies can help, which is in terms of standardization. So, for example, we created our system from the ground up to have APIs, and then we're trying to document a lot of the metadata of what we're sending. But what you end up finding is different systems measure the same thing, but we measure it slightly differently, and it's quite a nightmare to actually realize and move stuff from one system to the other. And I think the last thing about data integration is around ownership, and that's more, it's around us and clients, and then making sure that there's enough freedom for companies to operate and be able to use the data to improve our systems and collaborate doing that. But at the same time, clients can own their data and reap some of the benefits of that data.
Yeah, that's very true. So lots of smiles on the terminology problem, and that is a very large issue. I think in terms of people that access data and use data as part of their product, John Pierre, I know that's a key part of your work. So do you want to make any comments?
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. I'll just quickly add that, looking at it from a global perspective as well, it's clear that when we see the consolidation in a space like farm management systems, that some people are trying to tackle this whole issue by looking at what is the kind of operating system, so to speak, of agriculture, and how can we, have a software solution to be able to pull from different data sources into one cohesive platform. So that's where, obviously we see, TELUS, for example, with the acquisition of Muddy Boots and all the other kind of consolidation we've seen, primarily in North America, around farm management systems. I suspect it's a big part of the reason is trying to crack this whole issue about data integration and making it actually useful and actionable for farmers. But in all reality, it's something that still is up in the air. So don't have the silver bullet for you, unfortunately.
Yeah, there is no easy solution. It's a commercial problem and it's a technical issue. Mark, is there anything you'd like to comment on from the AGCO point of view? You guys have a vast quantity of data you have access to and you could deploy. I know you're doing a lot in this area already.
We're very much at the practical end of this. We're not agronomists. We don't give recommendations. We're a farm machinery company. But quite often we have exposure to the decisions that farmers want to implement on their farm. I agree with everything that Sven said, for example, in terms of trying to get some standards, I guess, established. And to be fair to the machinery industry, we've gone some way down that road. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of ISO bus and ISO XML. It would be great if we could try and bring in other aspects of that in terms of agronomics, because what we've got to do is turn data into value. We can soon fill a computer up with data. That's not an issue. It's about trying to make decisions on that data which add value to the business. And that's not something that we as a farm machinery company can do. This has to be a collaborative effort within the industry. And it's not just us. It's the agronomists, they've got to make a contribution. It's also the farm software companies that are out there. Everybody has to get around the table and end up with some integrated solution that the farmer can use at a practical level to make decisions which add value to his business.
That's true. Last comment maybe from Barath. You want to comment?
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. Thank you. I agree to pretty much everything that's been said. I think at the start of the conference, we heard some really good insights from the farmers, and everyone mentioned about understanding and utilizing the data better that they get. So I think that's our approach or our attempt with Nevernex and from Bosch to try and be part of that process to make that data understandable or more find a more interoperable solution. So we are coming from, I think Mark just mentioned, so software technology companies have to take part in that process, and I guess that's part of our contribution to this, and hopefully we can bring that solution forward so farmers in the end are benefited.
Yeah, that's key. Okay, on to the next question. Another difficult one. So in our recent survey, Agri-EPI Centre, we found that farmers are increasingly saying that profitability is one of their top priorities. Surprisingly, I suppose, unsurprisingly. So how can Agri-Tech support farm businesses to be more resilient and more financially sustainable? Let's go back in reverse. So Barath, if there's anyone to comment on that.
Yeah, I think again leads to how you optimize the existing processes that are and methods and practices being used, and can we contribute to that by using technology, be it sensor data, more efficient use of software, and going forward with artificial intelligence and so on. So can all of that come together to add value to the farmer, so they're not trying to spend time to understand that, but actually use the information they get from that to be more precise, be more accurate. And I think that in the end will lead to the profitability, the productivity that is required.
Thank you very much. Mark?
I sense there's an opportunity, right? I don't know who it's for, but maybe it's the Agri-Tech centres. We need somebody to step up and lead this integration process. The two measures that I try and sort of instigate are, is the technology usable on a real farm? In other words, I don't need a PhD student resident on the farm to tell me how to interpret it or use it. And the second one is, can I get value from it? So having got the technology up and running, is the value proposition achievable? And I've been lucky enough to be involved in precision farming for many years. And I think the thing that's changed over the years is that farmers have accepted technology as part of the solution, as part of their future. So the barrier against technology is not there as much as it was. What we've got to do, though, is work together as an industry to make the technology more usable and more user-friendly in terms of getting value from it at the end of the day. So coming back to that opportunity, I think it would be great to see somebody step up to try and bring people together to sit around a table and let's work on behalf of farmers to make technology systems usable and deliver real value at the end of the day. So that's my challenge to us as a supply chain, is to try and work together to make these systems work.
Yeah, it's important. Okay, Jose, do you want to go next and comment on that?
Yeah. For your question, I guess Agri-Tech is a big bucket. So my answer would be it can help in many different ways, and it depends a lot in what the challenges of the farm are. I think we're living in a really exciting time where there was an industrial revolution, and really machinery allowed us to do lots of things that were before never thought possible. And really, I think what we're living is that data revolution of like, okay, now sometimes it's a bit of a mess, but there's lots of stuff that we can do now that were before never thought possible. Like for us, being able to walk into a shed and have something on your app that tells you, okay, look, these 3 animals already look to be sick. Or if you've got machinery and you're irrigating, being able to be precise with your water to whatever square meter is getting, and you know how much water is going in each square meter. So depending on the type of farm, the challenges they're facing, they can both increase productivity and reduce whatever the waste they're doing.
Yeah. Clearly, data and good systems, they're vital for enabling good productivity. John, again, key to your platforms. Any comments there?
Yeah, so obviously sustainability has slightly different meanings depending on the context and who you're speaking to. But I think if I put on the lens of sustainability from a planetary perspective, let's say, I think obviously we do have a lot of interest in farmers moving to practices, for example, like regenerative. That's the buzzword, what people talk about a lot. I do see the role for ag tech as well of being a connector in a way, connecting farmers to, for example, the world of people who want to pay for sustainable practices, whether it could be corporates who want to offset their carbon emissions, investment funds who want to look at things from an ESG perspective. There's a whole world that's interested in KPIs linked to sustainable agriculture. So I think, now we're seeing platforms and monitoring tools and all these things which are coming up because, essentially we want to connect the farmer and the farming community to this whole, industry pain point or global pain point of solving climate change, for example. So that's another way ag tech can play a role of facilitator and of farmers, even via tackling planetary sustainability, improving the sustainability of their operations, so to speak.
Do you think that environmental sustainability, in your tools, are you also able to support financial sustainability? That's a key part of the sustainability picture.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was just trying to link in, although maybe I use sustainability too much. But the financial sustainability, that's the key thing as well, obviously, right? So if we can find a mechanism where, firstly, I guess, if we're talking about farmers changing their practices, obviously there's a lot of, hand-holding and scenario analysis and everything else that's required to make sure that that's even feasible. But then secondly, assuming that there's interest and it does make sense, facilitating the linkages between, say, for example, regenerative agriculture and the voluntary carbon markets, that's something where there's a whole technology pipeline that needs to be implemented. And I think that's where ag tech / climate tech / fintech kind of can play a role. So, and thereby, hopefully meaning that farmers have another source of income. In the US, people talk about or not just in the US, but now globally, carbon farming, for example, like another crop. So if that does essentially, live up to the hype, let's say, that we're hearing at the moment, then obviously it could be potentially another exciting revenue stream, but let's see.
Definitely. Sven, I haven't given you a chance to comment this time around, so anything before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, no, I can just, all of you guys really resonated with me, and that's what we have to do. It takes a village to raise a child, right? And that's why we are all in this together, to put the farmer into the center. I think this is really what needs to change drastically within the ag tech industry, because tech itself only has the purpose to serve mankind, so to say. Also, if that sounds very philosophical, but that's what we have to do. This is what we have to focus again on, solving the farmer's pains, not our pains or somebody else's pain, but the farmer in the center, and solve their problems.
Yeah. And when you think about the best ways of doing that, I think leads in very nicely into the next question. So how can we motivate, I suppose, enable farmers to use Agri-Tech? Can we support them through agricultural policy, or do we need to really be demonstrating the return on investment they get from the technologies we're all developing? Perhaps mix up a bit and go with Mark this time.
To be blunt, it's about money. Whether we like it or not, we all want to be successful and have a nice lifestyle and make money from it. So it's about convincing farmers that if they adopt a new farming practice or buy a new bit of technology on the farm, that they can make some money from it and get a payback. And I think to a certain extent we've been successful in some technologies. I mean, guidance technologies is widely adopted, but that's pretty easy to see the payback. Underlaps, overlaps, and all those things that we know about are quite easy to obtain. Moving forward, it gets a little more complicated when you go into sort of horizontally integrated systems where one person doesn't own the entire system. You have to work with people to the left and to the right in order to facilitate the value proposition, which comes back to some of the things I talked about earlier about usability and value proposition. There are other spin-offs that would incentivize farmer. Obviously, sustainability and climate change is a hot topic at the moment. But again, I would suggest if it's not financially viable for a farmer to do it, then they're going to struggle unless they really want to do it. The other thing that we need to keep in the back of our mind is everybody was talking about 9 billion people by 2050 as a world population. So we have some responsibility to create that balance between feeding people and doing it in a sustainable way at the same time.
Yeah. And obviously, if we don't push that challenge of creating sustainable farming, then farmers are going to run out of usable land. We're going to have many issues in the future. So it's key to do it. It's key for future farm profitability. Obviously, currently, we've perhaps got the low-hanging fruit sorted in terms of technology on farms, and it's filling in the trickier sections now in terms of technology development. I think, Jose, you've picked a very hard part of livestock management. So any comments on how you go about motivating your farmers to use your tools?
Yeah, I think what you said about demonstrating value it's key, and making sure that you have ways of showcasing the technology and what difference it makes. And in terms of policy, and then I would like to add a layer to what Mark was saying, because I agree completely with what he said. I think it's also about de-risking that understanding of how the implementation of that technology would happen on the farm. Because right now, if you think about it, a lot of technology represent a really significant way of changing how things are done, be it with like very expensive equipment or just changing farm protocols very differently. And there's a lot of inertia to move to completely changing something, and then what if it doesn't work? So if there's policy there to enable both showcasing the technology on farms, but also doing the implementation on farm. And then if it doesn't work, then you can potentially switch out or change something. It's not like a decision that you have to make that you have to live with for the next 20 years of your life. So I think that would help a lot in rolling out and making sure that more technologies are tried out on farm, and then whatever works continues to be used.
So effectively, the way to demonstrate new technologies on farms with minimal risk to farming as a whole. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
I mean, maybe comment on Jose here. I think that's very crucial, because demonstrating the benefit, I mean, let's be honest to ourselves. All of our companies, especially the big ones, have great sales forces out there going to the farmers and telling them how beneficial this or this machine is, right? And they are fairly good trained, and then the farmer buys it. But the real problem is that also we, to some extent, cannot predict the world. There will always, something will happen, right? That will require the farmer to change his strategy, or go to another crop whatsoever. And we have to give, I think, in order to really push AgTech through, we need to give the farmer the flexibility to adopt different technologies without being locked into a system, without being, as Jose mentioned, without doing a fairly huge investment that he can't pay off in a fairly quick time. So this needs us to adopt, in terms of us, the business, being more risky, so to say, by giving the farmer the opportunity and the flexibility to really choose what they think is best. Sorry for jumping in, Elliot.
That's okay. Yeah, didn't that's flexibility? I'll take it as your answer to the entire thing. So, didn't that's about flexibility in tools and flexibility in terms of how farmers engage with manufacturers?
Both. It's tools, but also how they engage with us. I think this will change quite a bit. I mean, if we take a look at the new generation also of farmers coming up, with the availability of the internet, people will gather information way easier than they did in the past, right? So therefore, they are also maybe more willing to change, and therefore we need to be honest and transparent to the farmer, to empower them to make the best decisions possible for them.
Yeah, definitely. John, you want to comment on empowering farmers with decisions?
Yeah, it's you know, obviously we have a slightly different slant, being, you know, a software company. I think you know, Mark is totally right though. I think, you know, we see, you know, the financial side of it is very crucial, and you know, obviously farmers in a kind of unique position where they kind of sandwich between a supply chain with some very big companies on either side of them. So I think for us as a software provider, we've kind of focused on how we can have a business model that doesn't put the burden financially on the farmer, but hopefully, you know, can try and leverage both sides of the supply chain around them, whether it's the input companies, banks lending to them, insurance companies, or the commodities traders on the other side. How we can push the financial burden on them, but the farmer being the end beneficiary of the services essentially we're providing. So for example, remote sensing technology that we use, we provide, you know, our clients are actually the input companies, and then the farmers could access the apps that these companies use, or provide them. So that's kind of another answer, I think, you know, how you can tweak our business model so that the burden isn't essentially on the farmer, you know.
You know, giving them alternative sources of income, alternative services they can pull in.
Yeah, additional services, but essentially, I guess, to put it bluntly, that they don't have to, you know, fork out, you know, out of their pockets for, essentially. So.
Okay. And finally, Barath, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think agree with what has been said a lot already, but I think there's some good comments coming through on the chat. I think Paul Lindorf has just said value isn't just about you know, pounds and dollars, but about time, peace of mind, and welfare of the people. So I think whatever we are trying to put together as technology has to encompass all those factors. And again, another comments come in. It has to be simple and easily understandable. So the so-called user experience has to be brought into all of this. And hopefully all of those elements will add up to enabling the farmer in the end to try out the technology and accept it and then benefit from it.
Yeah, we get a lot of feedback along those lines as well, that technologies are not necessarily as usable as they could be. And that's a vast area of work that needs to be done across hardware and software, definitely. Okay, I think I have to move on to the next question, unfortunately. So talking again about the survey that was conducted recently, we found that so far about 60% of farmers have already taken actions to reduce their environmental impact. How can Agri-Tech support that and accelerate that transition towards net zero? John might have some big word comments on this.
Yeah, sorry, I was just also reading some of the comments as well. Yeah, slightly distracting, but anyway, I think obviously agriculture has a huge role to play in terms of how we can, get to net zero, and obviously in its role as a key kind of climate tool. But I think, underlying it though, we still have a lot of work to do in terms of really, ensuring the science is really robust, first of all, in terms of how much, carbon can be sequestered or methane can be reduced or whatever other kind of KPI is of interest. We need to make sure that the science is robust, that the methods that we're telling the farmers to adopt to the new practices actually do result in the net effect that we are saying or hoping for. But that's a science that will evolve, I think, and it continues to evolve over the coming years. I think, though, in the UK, we're quite uniquely positioned in a way because obviously, having a huge financial sector and having task forces like the, voluntary carbon task force, we kind of uniquely positioned to see how we can link agriculture and land practice use and land ownership, let's say, with climate change and climate solutions. So hopefully we're going to see some business models and financial models that can actually facilitate that exchange. But I think, to be honest, we're still in the early phase. When you look at agriculture versus, other nature-based solutions, as we call them, so forestry or anything else, it's quite clear that we're just starting this journey. But I think, it's another exciting area that's going to get increasing interest. Especially things like, I guess, on the livestock side. How can we actually, try and see how we can, cut different emissions in that sector as well? That's going to be one of the key challenges going forward.
Okay, moving on with livestock, maybe Jose, you want to talk around that area?
Yeah, sure. I'll stick with my theme of three. So in terms of how I think Agri-Tech can support this, it's probably, I would see it in, first of all, there's quite a lot of technologies trying to first reduce any carbon emissions that are created, right? So, and that's already an important part of the use of Agri-Tech in the reduction. But then also, the second thing is increasing the efficiency and productivity, right? So not only what you're producing by itself generates less, but you can produce more with less resources, which means that your footprint is also smaller. And this third thing, I think, and going back to some of the comments that have been coming through about the people, I think, and I call this, I don't know, the rule of cool. So we need to, Agri-Tech plays a big role in making jobs in agriculture easier and nicer to do and more engaging, and helping bring in this next generation and getting them engaged, knowing like, yeah, look, you could be working in this, it's you work in a field and you work with this nice tractor and you've got all this technology and drones and all this stuff, like, and the barriers for acquiring new talent. I'm hoping that Agri-Tech will help dissipate those and bring new people in that have a new set of skills and interest into the field. Pun intended.
Mark, go over to you. I mean, as a large machinery manufacturer, you're going to have a slightly different viewpoint on this, I think, to the more tech-focused companies.
Yes, I mean, it's a challenge inside a company like AGCO because we want to sell big tractors and big implements, and that doesn't always fit with sustainable farming. But we're realists. We know that we have to be more environmentally friendly, not only inside the company, but outside the company in the way we try and help farmers as well. So I think we believe that there's a lot of good technology already out there. So we've talked about guidance, and if you apply it in a controlled traffic farming system, as it were, then that should hopefully increase or help the soil, increase soil fertility and all the benefits that come with that. So there are things that are already sort of established and in the pipeline. I think one of the things particularly that we've struggled with is something called precision farming, which you already know about, particularly on the variable rate side. The concept of feeding the crop as it needs it is right, but we're not there yet for things that we've perhaps discussed already about the lack of usability, good usability, and getting that value proposition from the technology. It's not easy for a farmer to sit down and figure out whether he should put more fertilizer in one place and less in another. I think all the elements are there. I think the decisions to help farmers are available. But again, I think it comes down to trying to work together on behalf of the farmer to simplify that process. So we work with a number of farmers. I mean, they're real farmers. And we try and coach them, educate them on some of these elements. And some of those projects can be quite revealing in just how fragmented and complicated this processes can be. That certainly educates some of our senior team in AGCO about the things that we can try and focus on. And it's not all about new technology. Some of it is about taking the existing technology and joining the bits and pieces up so the farmer can use it in the real world, as it were. So
yeah, back to the fragmentation problem, I suppose.
Yeah, it is a major challenge that we have as an industry, and again, there's a conflict there as well. I mean, we're a commercial company, and we want to have an edge on our competitors. So it's not always sort of something that we're willing to do, to put our differences to one side and open up systems, as it were, and lose that competitive edge. So it's not an easy answer, but still we aren't talking to one another, then we're always going to end up with this situation where it's going to be an element of fragmentation that holds us back.
Yeah. I haven't got long left with this question, but I suspect Sven might have a quick comment to make on how we go around improving that fragmentation problem to enable all this.
Yeah, I think that what makes the topic of reducing environmental impact even tougher is it's not only fragmentation on the machine side, but also fragmentation on the, let's call it, measure side. There's a lot of stuff you can do in order to be more environmental friendly, reducing, obviously, fertilizing, spraying, but also making sure that the tractors and the implements you're running on the field are not using as much fuel as they need right now, or as they used back in the days. So it's a vast and big variety of topics we need to tackle there, and this makes it even tougher to challenge. On the other hand side, it also gives you a lot of opportunities, because there's a lot of stuff you can do. We are talking with our people for making tire pressure adjustments in real time depending on your soil, whether it's super moist or whether it's dry. This reduces the impact on the soil. This reduces the consumption of fuel, for example, for the farmer. So we have specific use cases. Also, what Mark mentioned, variable rate. I know this topic has been around for quite some time, and the industry was not able to deliver to the farmer, so to say. But I'm very optimistic right now. We have great field trials with Echo in the US, for example, where it works nicely, where the UI is easy to use, where we go out to a farmer, set up the system within 30 minutes, and it just works. And nobody needs a PhD. They just need to love Echo machines, of course. No, but that's really it. There's a lot we can do, which is great, because this sparks creativity and everything. But it's a big topic, no doubt about it. But we can do something, and we are progressing nicely, I think.
Yeah, definitely a big topic. Talk for hours on that, I'm sure. But I'm afraid we're running out of time. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go on to the next question. So, final question. What is the role of technology to support on-farm decisions? I'm afraid I missed Barath in the last set of questions. So if you're happy to open with a comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I think it plays a key role, isn't it? Because everything, the machines today, the implements, everything is telling the farmer to do certain things, or the farmer is utilizing that to get a certain result out of it. So technology absolutely plays a critical role in informing, and as we've heard before, I think going forward that needs to be more targeted, more precise, and being more of providing that assistance and helping the farmer, easing the decision making. And I think that's where the technology part comes in, providing that support system. Otherwise, it's trying to understand the various systems. Again, going back to that interoperability question, can things be simplified? And that's where I think we have a role to play in making it simple, and that's where the technology has to play an important part.
Yeah. Do you think open source technology forms part of that solution?
I think, yes, Sven, please go ahead. I think there's a bit of a...
Sven, yeah.
I think it's not open source in the traditional way in terms of Linux or anything, but it's definitely, let's call it open collaboration, what also Mark mentioned in his various comments. We are all companies that want to make a profit, but at the end, to make sure that it all works together, we also need to work together. And this is what needs to be open. So we need to reduce the barriers between different OEMs. We need to reduce the barriers between the big ag camps and the ag machinery providers. And with that, we all together, and there's no way that somebody can do it alone. Let's face it. I mean, maybe the guys with the yellow wheels, they're a little locked in. But the rest of us, we need to make sure that we all work together. And this is open source for me, really, and not something with respect to specific code or whatnot. That's what we need to solve.
Yeah, it's interesting discussion, and definitely various different methods by which you could go about enabling profitability through open source technology. We do feel like I've got slightly off topic here, so I think we're meant to be talking about the role of technology and supporting on-farm decisions. John?
Yeah, I think it's all about, how can we essentially de-risk what's inherently a very risky line of business, right? And we see a lot of innovation around things like weather forecasting or uses of satellite imagery, for example, or precision agriculture when it comes to machinery as well. So I think it's we have all the tools there to essentially de-risk the farm operation. The question is, how do you do it in a cost-effective manner that hits to all the points that are rightly raised in the comments, I guess, in terms of functionality, usability, and everything else. So what is the role? I think it's a huge role in terms of being able to de-risk the operation and optimize and make farmers obviously no matter the climate or the weather or pest and disease, be a more resilient operation generally, and more sustainable as well, obviously. So there's a huge potential function, but I guess the question mark is around how exactly do we deliver this, and that's not something I'm going to solve for you in 1 minute. But I think hopefully that's enough for the rest of these sessions today.
Yeah. Perhaps we go over to Mark for a comment on that. Again, very different viewpoint, I think, from a lot of people here.
I mean, technology is an essential part of our future, whether we like it or not, and I think everybody has accepted that. So, but the challenge is, as I say, is delivering technology and systems and farming practices that can be implemented. and that's where we're really struggling. And our industry is quite unique in some ways. I mean, we're a manufacturer, and if we produce a tractor in South America, for example, we can very easily uplift that manufacturing process and install it in India. We don't have, it's not too complicated, but the farmer is dealing with so many different variables: weather, different soils, pests and diseases, all those things that impact what a farmer needs to manage and do. And that is very local. So we can't develop some farming practice in South America and then cut and paste it over into India. We have to learn how to apply that farming practice in India. And the role of technology will help us and facilitate that, but it does require an understanding of what drives yield or animal growth or whatever it might be in India versus South America. So there has to be an element of adapting the technology as well. So that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So I mean, I'm an optimistic person. I think over the 30 years that I've been involved in precision farming, for example, we've made great strides. When I look back where we were and where we are now, I mean, we have a lot of good information to hand. We have pockets where people are making big impacts on precision farming or using precision farming and sustainability. I visited a farmer the other day that is using green cover crops, for example, to try and boost carbon sequestration. There's a lot of good things that are happening, but I'm sounding like a broken record. We need to talk to each other. The key is to make these things usable for all farmers, not just the top 5% farmers, as it were. We need to upscale these models and translate them around the world with the support of the locals so we can adapt them to their conditions. So we've got a bright future, guys. I'm very pleased and honoured to be part of this revolution that is happening, but we've got to talk to each other.
Yeah, I think that's a big takeaway from this conversation. Collaboration on everything is vital, definitely. Jose, I think you get the last comment of the talk.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I think just to introduce a word, technology can play a big role, and it should play, and I think it will do. And as Mark was saying, the first step is just being able to, we can gather a lot of data, but that data needs to be linked and it needs to be interpreted in a way that it's easy for someone to then action on it. And I think the only thing that I would add to what the previous panelist said is that not only at a single farm level, but what Mark hinted at, when a lot of what you can test out in agriculture takes a long time to test. So for example, in our field, if we're helping out with calf rearing and you're looking at the impact of that over second, third lactation of that cow, it takes years to see what you're doing today, how's that affecting in the future. If we're able to then start sharing information and run and see some of these practices across multiple farms, then it's going to take a lot of work to be able to translate from one farm to the other, but you can start getting those hints as to what is worth trying and moving and expanding on, so that you don't have to wait 25 years to run 5 trials of, okay, maybe I'll try this, doing this slightly differently.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you for everyone. I think we're going to have to draw an end there. Very much enjoyed this conversation. I think with hopefully era of collaboration might be in the future. We'll see. Yeah, thank you everyone, and I think back to Annabelle to move us into the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you
all for that, Ben. That was absolutely brilliant. So we've heard a lot about the technology that is currently being developed, engineering companies, technology companies, and now we're going to hear more about actually how we're going to get that adopted on farm. So we're going to start with our next panel session now, and I'm delighted to bring in our new CTO, Trish Toot, to chair that as well.
still got some music going on. There we are. Good afternoon and welcome to the third panel session of our conference today. You might have noticed that we haven't got Sarah. We've got Tim back again. So thank you for staying on to do a second slot for us, Tim. I'm sure it will be really good. And actually, I've got some questions on that really relate to what you sort of presented earlier on. So that will be a really good follow on. And I'm trying to be keeping track of the comments that we've got coming in from the people on the previous two panels. So hopefully we can bring some of the current questions through from them. Unfortunately, I won't have time to do all of it because I wanted to keep on time. So everybody's been very good at keeping on time so far. So I don't want to be the one that makes us slip and be late for the lunch and networking. I'm Trish Toop. I'm the new CTO of Agri-EPI. So this is my first large event for the company, as it's I'm basically just about a month in, bar for a couple of days. So really good to see you all and sort of be involved in this straight off. So really we're going to look here at how sort of policy and what we can do on a wider scale can help in developing agri-tech and how that can sort of link to delivering on farm. So we've looked really at sort of what the farmers want, how the tech developers are going about this, but then now how we can sort of help assist that on a wider basis. So the first question, and I have actually tweaked these, so sorry Annabelle, you're going to have to listen to type the little bit at the bottom. So how really can the government funding, especially that you sort of mentioned earlier, Tim, help with tech integration and communication to sort of get this tech onto farm? Because it seems that it seems to be at the moment focused on smaller integration. Is there anything that you can do and that we can do to make sure that the tech that's being developed will talk to other tech? Sorry, it's not an easy one to start. My apologies.
Okay. Did you want me to take that one, Trish? Did you?
Yeah, if you can initially, and then obviously we'll open it to the rest.
Okay. I mean, I think there's several questions in that question. So,
yeah,
but I mean, to give the sort of general picture, I don't want to repeat what I said before, but we're keen that we're serious about agri-tech. I mean, I think that a few years ago nobody was talking about agri-tech. I think things took a corner back in 2013 when there was the first agri-tech strategy, which really put a lot of government money on the table and really started getting and that's of course what led to the creation of the 4 Agri-Tech centres. So it's a good news story, as long as sort of more smaller type projects. But that was really the the start of this change. And I think the question is sort of about how it can talk to each other and how it can help with the funding, isn't it, really? And on the funding, we had the spending review announcement yesterday. It's quite the actual whole thing is quite a tome, but if you delve into the deeper recesses of what the budget says, it's got a bit about innovation features quite heavily in the Chancellor's speech yesterday, and a lot of that is directed at net zero, and that's clearly what we've been talking about today. And for DEFRA, there's already sort of money on the table, and I mentioned some of the competitions we've got going at the moment, which is 17.5 million, which is not small money. It's huge sums of money. We're working with UKRI to deliver that. We want it to be farmer led. And so that's and we're really keen for farmers just to come together and really sort of come forward with ideas. And it was really interesting hearing the farming panel session earlier this morning, where Andy was talking about the boluses which his cattle are using. There was Rob was talking about drones to count his sheep, and Jake about fences for his sheep. So it's all really interesting stuff, and that's what we want people to come forward with. And so apart from farmers feeling that they're actually got a stake in that development of R&D, we hope that they can also reap some of the benefits from the fruits of that R&D. But as mentioned in the last panel session, that can be over a really long period. So that's what we're doing to help. And also, I touched on it very briefly earlier, but we are going to roll out a farming investment fund later this year, which will provide support to farmers, foresters, growers, contractors, and so on. And there's two elements to that. There's a farming equipment technology fund, which is based on a list of specific items, so it's fairly easy to apply. That's what stakeholders, farmers told us. They want something easy, not bureaucratic to get their money, and obviously they have to co-fund the cost of the kit. And then for larger projects, there's a farming transformation fund, which will support higher value, sort of more complex investments to bring about really sort of transformational improvements to business performance. And that's a bit more involved because we're talking about heftier sums of money. But if you take the farming investment fund together with the money that government's putting on the table for further R&D, it's quite a good story. Is it going to be enough? It's never going to be enough, is it? We know that, but I think the government is serious about sort of getting behind innovation and the farming sector.
Thank you very much, Tim. Sorry, and I didn't sort of give everybody time to go through who they are, and there should be something in the documents. But we have got Graham, Bryn, and Cameron. Have any of you got any sort of insights or thoughts on what you think that should happen with regards to this linking? I've got more specific questions that I will ask you and pick on you later for. Sorry, I shouldn't say pick on, but yeah, we'll ask later. But does anybody else want to put in? Yeah, Cameron, please.
Yeah, at the risk of repeating what Tim said in that helpful overview, I guess under the farming investment fund, that's as we understand it, kind of building on two previous schemes. So the countryside productivity small grant scheme and then the countryside productivity large grant scheme, which are both really popular schemes in the past, and so that's really good to see that they'll be coming back online. I guess more kind of linked to the question that you asked is perhaps the innovation that Tim referenced and the innovation program. And I know that the first sort of tranche of programs under that scheme launched fairly recently in the last week or so, but there are two more to come online, and there's one specifically called the Projects to Accelerate Adoption Fund, as Tim probably I'm sure he knows. And I guess that would be the sort of the key one in kind of to be honest, I think the sort of details on that are still yet to be published, but that would be the sort of key one in terms of bringing sort of innovation on farm and sort of looking at how that's going to be done.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I can say more about that one if you want me to, Trish.
I think we might come on to that a little bit later, maybe. But thank you very much. Mainly because I have lots of questions, and if I don't get through enough of them, Annabelle will tell me off later. So one of the things that actually came up in chat box earlier is that some people think that legislation in the UK may hinder sort of tech development and innovation. So maybe a question for Bryn specifically is really are current policy regulations limiting the use of technology innovation? So maybe drones outside of line of sight or spraying drones. And is there anything that that needs to be done to help with that?
The legislation, particularly relating to the use of pesticides or the application of pesticides, tends to be outcome focused. So there is scope within the legislation for innovative approaches in delivering the desired outcomes. In terms of drones, there are many different pieces of legislation that are controlled by different government departments. So beyond line of sight is the remit of the Civil Aviation Authority, and we do work with the Civil Aviation Authority to make sure that we are working in tandem rather than at opposite ends of the same spectrum. The legislation doesn't limit technology, but the organisation, CID, is an evidence-based organisation, and one thing that we do need is evidence to show that the use is safe. We are subject to the law just like anyone else, and we have to be able to make sure that our decisions are supported by the appropriate evidence. What I would recommend anyone doing any sort of innovation with the application of pesticides is come and talk to us as soon as you've got an idea, because we will be able to help direct you towards the data that you will need to get that innovation out into the field. Thank you.
That's absolutely brilliant, because my next question is there anything we can do to sort of help move that forward? So that's really good to know for our tech developers, that you're open to having discussions, for them coming to you straight away and going, we've got this fab idea, we'd like to move into this sort of field of operation, for want of puns, and to know that you're available to have those discussions. So that's really, really good. One of the things that we've found in our recent survey, which has been sort of mentioned a couple of times, and that went sort of live in the press last week, is the majority of our farmers we surveyed said that cost was a real barrier when they're looking at Agri-Tech. And I know that we've got some future grants and schemes coming up, which is why I said earlier that we'll probably get back to some of the other grants that you mentioned earlier on. So for sort of adopting and getting tech onto farms, one tech that might already be developed and sort of early stage commercial, so still quite expensive and still probably quite difficult to get loans for. What sort of support have we got coming up for that in the future? Tim, initially, I don't think anybody else seems to be wanting to.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a question before about regulation, which probably.
Oh yeah. If anybody else would like to.
Didn't round off. So I can say something about that. But on the last question about the funds, so there's the and I just put a bit of this in the chat actually just now in response to a question from Mark Griffiths. But on the Farming Investment Fund, there's the small grants. Yeah, that's the one. So which is it looks a bit, and that's called the Farm and Equipment Technology Fund. So that's we're looking at smaller grants up to, I think it's about 25,000. It is, and that the farmer or landowner or contractor would have to part fund that, of course. But the idea is that would be on a list system, sort of standard list system. The feedback from key stakeholders was that worked well under the Countryside Productivity Fund, and it made it easier to apply while still providing government with the balances and checks and anti-fraud and all that sort of stuff we have to worry about. And then that will hopefully go a long way to getting farmers to buy new kit and get it be more innovative. And then the farming then the larger fund is the sort of Farming Transformation Fund, which as I mentioned before is the bigger sort of transformational kind of collaborative projects, and that's a bit more heftier sums of money and so a bit more involved.
Thank you very much. So did you want to say something with regards to the regulation as well? Yeah,
well, there's a few things that sprung to mind when which has come up in the discussions of the previous panels actually, which one is about when for example Rob was talking about drones to count his sheep. I know that's an issue that is a concern. Obviously there's a balance with everything, so we're trying to look at how we can support drone technology and all other sorts of technology, and with drones in particular, for example, we know there's a problem about having to only being able to have them in within sight, and concern about where you fly them, and all of these things, and all those regulations are in place for a purpose. And so we're doing what we can to see if we can revisit these regulations to make it easier, but we've got to, there's always going to be a balance. There's a whole load of other things that spring to mind, and I could probably go on for ages, but alternative proteins in all its forms, whether it's clean meat, produced in labs, or meat alternatives, which are on the increase. I mean, they're all live issues at the moment, and alternative proteins also includes insects and things like this, black soldier flies technology and things like that, which would require us to work with the Food Standards Agency to see, apart from the whole consumer thing. We haven't been talking about the consumer much today, but there's the whole consumer palatability issue. But there's regulations around that. But one of the other things that sprung to mind on the regulatory front is gene editing. Now, I'm sure most of you will have heard the Oxford Farming Conference in January last year. The Secretary of State announced that we're going to do a big consultation on, now that we've left the EU, whether we can just free up the regulations around gene editing. A few weeks ago, the government produced a response to that consultation, and the idea is, as a first step, we want to make it easier for researchers to carry out that R&D into gene editing, which and we're talking about crops here to start with, which could have been the end result could be the same as a crop derived from natural breeding techniques, traditional breeding techniques. So that's one example where we are sort of government's trying to bring down the barriers on regulation.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And actually that really sort of new, quite innovative tech really brings on to the next question, is a lot of the tech that's being developed is very cutting edge. And how can people prove that they've got that sort of innovative step and then protect their innovation? And this is probably a question for Graham, is sort of how do our small sort of tech developers really go about ensuring that this amazing new tech that they've developed is protected in a way that still allows them to sort of collaborate, get funding and get it out there as quickly as possible?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think it's important to know that almost anyone working in Agri-Tech is going to be developing potentially patentable inventions, whether it's from drone technology to autonomous vehicles to automated packaging, robotics, from using satellite imagery for crop managing, from farm safety, farm security, all current issues at the moment. These are all areas of technology which could potentially have patent protection available to them. And I think it's important to note you need to consider your IP before you disclose it. You've got to consider whether you wish to protect that IP before you disclose it, because the minute you disclose that IP into the public domain, you're effectively giving it away. So that's a really important thing to note. I think disclosure is actually worth talking about in some sort of take a moment to talk about it. There's I'm aware of quite a few trials and demos people are performing in public fields and on farms and similar. So the risk there is that if you are going to trial or demo your technology, whether it's an autonomous vehicle or in a field, then if there's a chance that someone could see that vehicle, that test or that trial, then that is potential disclosure into the public domain, which could then prevent you from obtaining valid patent protection at the end of it. So there was a recent court case a little while ago where some innovators were testing a bit of equipment, and they had a tractor there. They were paying close attention to the surrounding, who was nearby, the passers-by, and no one passed by. So actually, no one saw the technology. But the court decided that actually, because that technology was in the field and was available for public to see, that actually it was a disclosure, which then knocked out their patent when challenged. So I know a lot of people are trialing it. So it's a word of caution, please, to everyone out there: be very careful what you're trialing, what you're demoing. Have a chat with someone like myself first before you go into any potential disclosure, and work out, do you want to protect it? What's the value to your company protecting it? And make an informed decision on protecting that IP before potentially giving it away unintentionally. I think the other thing to mention is it's very important to view IP, intellectual property, as an investment, not a cost. A patent, for example, has a monetary value. It can add value to your company in the sense of being an asset on your balance sheet. And it's also obviously quite important, or obviously important, but it's very useful, I think, very helpful when seeking investment. Many clients report back that investors like to see that you've secured IP against your your products, your innovations to secure their investment against, essentially. And also that is inherent value in having the IP to deter people, would-be copiers, from copying your innovations, taking advantage of your research and development. And of course, it advertises the fact that you are an innovative company in itself. So there's many advantages to IP in that sense. In terms of the details of what you protect, there's many different strategies and costs associated with how you go about protecting your IP. You can have multiple patents in a portfolio. If you have various different technologies relating to the same similar innovation, again, automated autonomous vehicles, that's a good example of that, perhaps. Or you might decide actually to have a more excuse me, lost my light. A strategy where you have a single patent application, which you can then expand later on into multiple applications, depending on your funding and where you are on that roadmap. But ultimately, there's a lot of innovation in Agri-Tech. That's why we as a firm are very interested in supporting Agri-EPI, and we'd be very happy to talk to anyone and discuss their IP if they've got any questions.
And one, I suppose, follow on from me with that is, would sort of applying for funding to help develop an idea then inherently make it not patentable? Or, because I know some of our companies are quite worried about going for sort of public funding and how much of that disclosure would be an issue for you.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and the answer is potentially yes. Again, you need to be very careful what you disclose. If you disclose the nuts and bolts of how something works, you're potentially giving away an enabling disclosure which allows someone else to recreate your invention, in which case you would then not be eligible for patent protection. The way to go about it is usually you'd disclose it under confidentiality terms, or use an NDA or similar. Obviously, that doesn't always apply to seeking funding. So in that situation, I think you need to be very careful as what you disclose and what you've been asked to disclose. And again, speak to a specialist in IP like myself, and we can give you a steer and make sure you're not giving away anything which might cause you issues later on.
I'd like to open this question up to the panel. Is anybody else any sort of thoughts on this? Or yeah, Mark. Sorry. Yep. Yes. Graham. Sorry.
Graham, it's a very interesting point, because we need to know that the data has been generated and the results of those trials are statistically, scientifically robust, and often they have to be done in the field. So there's an immediate conflict there with the possibility of disclosure, but we also have to then evaluate that scientific data. Now we do that, and we're quite happy with confidentiality agreements over and above what we normally do. But there is that, how on earth does someone bring something to the regulator if they can't develop the test to prove that it works? And I don't expect, I'm not looking for an answer. It's just one of those things that really can stop the innovation if the person or the organisation doesn't feel that they are sufficiently protected for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that does seem to be a tension that's very, it's good to be aware of, especially as we're looking at a lot of very early stage. I mean, Cameron, is this anything that you've come across with regards to sort of the people that you work with in the CLA? Is this something that you've seen from your members? Or?
No, in truth. I mean, just listening and thinking about the points that have been raised. I mean, it would, some schemes will struggle to get off the ground if they're worried about applying for funding. I mean, saying the obvious here, and then having their sort of grand ideas shared and broadcast, and that does seem to be a real stumbling block. Yeah, I mean, it will be a real challenge to overcome. I mean, maybe Tim probably has had more thoughts on how that might work in practice than I would.
Okay, thanks very much. Tim, have you got anything to add on this one?
Not much to add, really. I mean, I think I'd just be repeating all the points that have been made. Really, I mean, it's I mean, we start off talking about sort of IP and everything. It is a minefield. It really is, and the only thing I'd add is on the various industry-led R&D partnership work that we're doing. We are working with UKRI to make sure that if it is farmer led, then the farmers will somehow reap the benefits. But it's let's not kid ourselves. It's really complicated, as I think it was Graham mentioned or someone. It's really long term, and we need to work that one through.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So the next one I've got is a really holistic one, hopefully, that will get everybody sort of involved. Is how do we take solutions to market? What are the considerations to making sort of agri-tech accessible to all? So, I mean, if I can come to you, probably Cameron, for this first, because you've got a really good sort of network and championing of the sort of rural economy and way of life within the CLA. So how do you sort of see us needing to sort of develop that to take solutions to market?
Yeah, I guess there are a couple of things I'd probably say to this one. I think there's, I'm not sure whether it's been mentioned earlier on today, I'm sure it has, but a fundamental need for training and skills. And so, you can have the most brilliant, innovative technologies in the world that will deliver on X, Y, and Z, but if people don't know how to use them and don't have the skills to, I guess, perhaps, gather the data and then analyze it, then, you're not necessarily going to deliver. Another thing we hear a lot about is sort of peer-to-peer learning, and you hear that farmers tend to sort of trust each other than they might from others outside the industry. So when it comes to taking solutions to the market, perhaps you need to get influential farmers involved who understand the practicality of farming, and to show that those have been understood when a particular product is being developed.
Thank you.
There for a moment.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually, I don't think we have really talked enough about sort of the training and skills needed. We kind of assume that we're going to develop this amazing tech. And somebody did say, I don't want something that I need a PhD to work on. But actually, the holistic system of how we get that across. And this is quite a diverse panel, but actually we need that whole umbrella. Bryn, have you got something to add on that?
It's one of the things that we have to consider. There are a whole raft of training courses that pesticide applicators, people who apply pesticides, have to go through. And what we don't want to do is invent a completely new set of courses that people have to go on just because it's new technology. We want to be able to use what we've got and, if necessary, maybe expand it a little bit, but certainly not add anything new, so that doesn't become a blocker to the technology innovation coming to the market. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Tim, have you got any comments on this one?
Yeah, just a few thoughts. I mean, Cameron is right about the peer-to-peer learning. The all the evidence that we've gathered, and I'm sure CLA have, a few as well, is that especially in England, UK, where perhaps farmers don't have a natural tendency to collaborate as much as they do in some other countries. Arguably, that peer-to-peer learning is really powerful, and I think it's worth mentioning the brilliant work that AHDB, Agricultural Horticulture Development Board, do on this front. They have a whole knowledge exchange program, which is run through their network of strategic farms and Monta farms, and they're always well attended. AHDB do a lot of analysis on what people are picking up, how they're changing their business, and that's worth delving into, because that's really quite good. It's probably a good moment to mention the Project to Accelerate Adoption Fund, which is, as I mentioned in my intro at the start, it's something that came out of the consultation we did in 2018, where people were saying, well, having big grant schemes and having a big fancy innovation high-tech fund is great, but what about sort of lower level trials, new methods and things like that? Where's the space to do that? And there isn't any. So we're trying to plug that gap, and we'll announce that this next year with this Project to Accelerate Adoption Fund. We're trying to think of a snappier title, but failing at the moment. But and we've been working with farmers and trade associations and so on to try and make sure that sort of hits the spot. And like I say, that'll be next year. And but it's true that the whole Farm and Innovation Programme, all elements of everything we're doing in conjunction with the UKRI at the moment, we're trying to build in a knowledge exchange function, because when we look at productivity and competitiveness and things like that, we know that when it comes to public and private investment in Agri-Tech, actually it's a bit of a myth that the UK underspends. Actually we do quite well in terms of government money put into this area, but what we haven't been so good at over the years is actually getting it into the marketplace. We know that, so it is a fragmented landscape. I'm not sure we can join it up overnight, but there's some brilliant initiatives out there, and we're trying to help with that via the sort of knowledge exchange function. The only other thought I had is just listening to this is that when it comes to peer-to-peer learning and the kind of things we're thinking of under the Project to Accelerate Adoption, although here we're sort of we're talking about Agri-Tech and there's big shiny machines with bells and whistles and drones and AI and all this. Actually, there's still very much a place for the more prosaic R&D about genetic improvement and trying new varieties and that sort of thing, which can be just as important, but doesn't always get the attention. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I know that when we speak to some of our farmers, they're looking to make the small gains that they can make relatively by looking and tweaking, and actually, yes, having that funding available is quite good. So I suppose the really big question to finish with is, how can we ensure that innovation is resulting on farm impact? Who else do we need to consider? So we've looked at training. So what advisors do we need to involve? Do we need to involve accountants, solicitors, IP protection, health and safety? Sort of what can we do, particularly from my perspective, I'm looking at the sort of the tech centres, but as a community in general, what can we do to sort of make sure that our innovations and what we're doing make an impact? And I'm just going to put that out, so stick your hand up and say something. I'm not going to put this to anybody. Graham, jump on here.
Thanks. Well, I'll start with saying there's a couple of comments. We're reading up the comments earlier on, and there's some interesting comments. One of the comments was the top driver for their adoption technologies. Will it save money or will it add value to their production? And someone else has commented recently, Peter Barrett, about the cost of IP. And yes, it can be expensive if you don't have the correct strategy applied from the outset. So there are some. So from my perspective, looking at a funding aspect, there's some interesting initiatives which the government provide, which might be worth mentioning now. And one of those is the R&D tax credits. I think someone did mention earlier on, helpfully, but I thought I'd flag it more publicly. There's quite a generous pot of money there the government allocate for R&D tax claims or any innovation R&D form, and as I understand it, it's quite a generous pot and not often used as much as it could be. So if you are innovating and doing R&D, please do explore that further. And I guess that taps into the other providers. Obviously, accountants would be able to help you with that. And whilst on the topic of accountants, there's also the HMRC Patent Box Tax Relief Scheme. So if you have a granted UK patent covering your products, you can claim tax relief of up to 10% reduction in your corporate tax, which can be obviously quite beneficial in terms of funding your business further to develop. And again, just to reiterate, I guess in terms of funding is a key factor of innovation. And so, having your IP as an asset, you can raise money against your IP. That's a key driver for investors often. And also, as I understand it, anecdotally, recently, there's a lot of VC money out there as well. So in addition to looking for government funding, don't forget to look outside, especially, as I understand it, coming from the US.
Yes, that's really good points, actually, Graham. And I know that Annabelle's sort of flagged up, we work with R&D tax credits, and in my previous role, we sort of did help companies identify, and it's amazing the amount of people out there that are doing some fantastically innovative stuff and don't realise that they can get some cash back for that for the time that they're not spending on their commercial enterprise, because they actually think their entire commercial enterprise is doing the R&D. Cameron, do you have any sort of thing that you think that we can do as a community in general to sort of get this on-farm impact?
I guess I was perhaps more coming from it from like on the ground trusted advisor perspective. So perhaps agronomists or farm business consultants who might be able to fill the gap, if there is one, between farmer knowledge on what's out there at the moment and what's possible, and then what's being developed and trialed at the moment. I guess this is perhaps a minor point, but from a grant funding application perspective, it's possible that I know the schemes that we referenced earlier, particularly the ones under the Farming Investment Fund, that have traditionally, or their predecessors have been fairly straightforward, and so you may not need help to work through an application. Hopefully that'll be the same going forward in the future. But having done them in the past, I have been able to lend a hand to help people work through the application. I suppose that doesn't answer the question on how the farmer or whoever it might be, identifies the need and opportunities for the technology themselves. I suppose that's about sort of just helping them through the process of getting it on the farm.
No, that's a really important point. So one of the things we need to consider is actually making that assistance accessible for all, without people having to pay vast numbers of amounts of cash to be able to fill in the application to get some more cash. And then Bryn, from your perspective, what can we do to get that impact?
I think the important thing is that the innovation doesn't fall at the last hurdle, and you're not at the very last minute trying to comply with regulations that you've only just discovered, whether they be for flying a drone or flying a pesticide or an autonomous vehicle that's running through a vineyard. I would just encourage anyone and everyone to contact whichever regulator they feel is responsible for what they're trying to do, and just have a conversation before you even start taking it onto the farm, because you don't want to set yourself up and then suddenly have to stop for a period of time while the regulator deals with what you want to do. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, and that it's so key. And I have seen it in the past. We've got a really good idea. Somebody comes to us and we sort of go, well, yeah, you're not allowed to do that at the moment. I suppose Tim mentioned insects. Had a really good young farmer come to me and say, I'd like to use all of this meat processing waste to grow some insects to feed some chickens. And well, actually it's a fab idea, but there are so many legislative requirements around that we'll just have a sit down and chat about. But then it's sort of, how do we then change that idea, or look at the legislation and see how we can develop something. Tim, have you got, this is our last gasp before Annabelle starts texting me to kind of...
Well, no. I mentioned earlier that on a few occasions that it's quite a fragmented landscape, and the KE, knowledge transfer, knowledge exchange is absolutely crucial. We can't force people to look at new technology and take it up, but one of the sort of perverse benefits of it being a fragmented landscape is there's no shortage of people to talk to. There's HDB. All farms will have a bank. The banks are they have large teams of agricultural consultants. There's agronomists. There's the professional organisations. They're all there to help. So making sure that people access those and get the right kit and don't waste their money is absolutely crucial. I agree, and that's a really key point. So yeah, that's all I'd say on that one. And incidentally, I did start trying to multitask and answer a few questions online, but I realised my multitasking skills weren't as good as I thought.
And I'm trying to do the same as Berlin. I'm supposed to be good at multitasking, but I feel as though I've probably reached my limit today. Graham, have you got something to? Yeah,
I was just going to pick up on something Bryn said. I mean, regulations is obviously a potential barrier to market. But another barrier to market worth mentioning is IP itself, of course. I mean, there's two sides of the coin, if you like, with patents. You get the patents registered in your name, which you can use to prevent other people from implementing your invention. But the other side of that coin is obviously the freedom to operate yourself. So just because you have a patent yourself does not mean that you are free to operate that invention or perform that invention. Patent's actually a negative right. So you should be cautious that there may be existing patent rights held by third parties, which you need to be aware of as well. And there's searches we can perform quite quickly and straightforward to determine any initial risks, which would then prevent you from entering the market. So it's something to bear in mind as part of your overall IP strategy, as well as considering how you protect your own IP. It's also, as you approach the market readiness, then make sure you're not infringing someone else's rights.
Yeah, and that's really good. And I've had to do patent searches myself on tech and things that we were helping people develop, and there's an awful lot out there internationally as well, because people tend to think a little bit about just inside our shores, but you could be infringing international patent rights. And I'm sure there's been some very big tech cases recently with the likes of Apple and things sort of.
Yeah, it's worth picking up there to say patents are territorial. So that's also an interesting thing to explore during the patent searches. You might find that perhaps there's a patent stopping you doing what you want to do in the UK, but you may be able to do it in another country. So it doesn't necessarily close the door because a patent exists. It depends what the patents are, which countries are covered by relevant patents.
Brilliant. Thank you, Graham. So the moral of this story is get the experts in early, because actually there are lots of different things to consider in it. And it might not just be getting your tech to work, but it's actually there's a whole plethora of things that we need to consider under that development process and being able to get it to the farms. But I think one of the first things that I know that we get back from the farmers is look at doing something that's relevant, because it's really hard to prove and to get impact out of something that isn't. Start talking and looking at the legislation early. Have a look at how whether that's patentable, whether you can operate, and actually get people like the CLA involved and make sure that that's usable and something you can get out there. So I'm going to put a plug in for the Agri-EPI Centre here actually, because it's our conference and I really should. Because actually we can help with a lot of these things. You know, we're not patent experts, but we can link up with people. You know, we can link you up with Graham. We can help with that overarching things. We're very involved with working with companies to help them bid into some of the DEFRA funding that's coming up. And we do have a satellite farm network. And you heard some of our satellite farmers before. They're excellent. They're really switched on. So if you want to trial something on farm and actually get feedback, and it's real feedback, and sometimes it hurts, but it's the feedback you need when you're in that tech development cycle. So that's my Agri-EPI pitch, and then I'll hand over probably to Dave Ross, who'll do another bit of Agri-EPI pitch later, I'm sure. But thank you all for being involved in the panel. It's been excellent, and thank you all for the brilliant comments. I've been trying to keep hold of them, but we'll go back. And Annabelle's been putting some bits and pieces in. But if you've got any further questions, get in touch with us, and I'm sure we can put something together for you. So thank you all very much for being involved.
Thank you very much, Trish. That was an excellent, really, really insightful presentation about all the different people that need to be involved on that product life cycle, essentially. So I'm now going to bring back our CEO, Dave Ross, who will give some final comments and just sum up those the day so far.
Thanks, Annabelle. An invidious position. We've had a few hours of really excellent discussion and interaction, and I will absolutely not do justice to all the comments and the insights that we've got. I will try to consolidate a few points, that maybe some take-home messages, and just review where we have extracted value out of today and where we could actually move forward. So here goes, and I do apologize in advance because this is no preparation and live, and I've been scribbling right up till about 30 seconds ago. So First of all, reviewing the day, I just wanted to give another shout out, especially thanks to Steve from Marks and Spencer's for hosting our awards ceremony. So just running through the awardees again. So the UK winner was Pruex, the runner-up was Agri-Tech, the international winner was Agri-Tech, and international runner-up was WeCow, and highly commended was Rumex. So just a shout out for those companies. And then we moved on to our keynote speaker, Tim, who has done both ends of today. And thanks, Tim, for cutting out so much time for this conference. So grateful for that. And I think for myself and I think many others who are listening, it was great to get that clear and concise overview of the agricultural transition plan from a senior spokesperson and leader in DEFRA. How those plans have been developed so far, what the routes out are for those plans, especially in the innovation space, and also the planning and co-creation space that Tim mentioned, which is bringing industry together, trying to understand where industry can actually help in the co-creation. And I'm sure there's opportunities to have dialogue with DEFRA on some of the schemes that may come forward in the next 12 to 18 months to be involved in that, to ensure we've got buy-in all the way through, and yet make sure industry and farming voice is heard. But I think Tim talked about many things in terms of the agricultural transition plan, but I just wanted to mention the headline areas, which was associated with obviously DEFRA's role using public money to reward environmental benefits, really important. And creating that trusted and productive relationship between farmers and government. And this conference is in some way helping or assisting in that process. We are renowned within the UK for having very high animal welfare standards, and it's pleasing that DEFRA are taking that banner and promoting that further going forward. And at the end of the day, we want a thriving, self-reliant, resilient and sustainable agri-food sector, especially obviously from the primary production process in the farming sector. So I think these are the big DEFRA bullets I wanted to re-highlight today, and just people understand where the main body responsible for our sector, and from the farming's perspective and the ag's perspective at least, sits and its priorities for the future. So very grateful for that overview by Tim. Then we went to a number of panel sessions, and I will absolutely not do justice to any of them. I'm just going to provide a few kind of key catchphrases. I was really delighted by the farmer session at the beginning. It was very interactive, and it felt we brought a real farmer perspective back into this, and the real pain points that farmers feel, and the adoptions and the different production systems that our farming community and predominantly our satellite farmers are involved in, where they've adopted Agri-Tech, where it's worked for them, what the pressures they're under. So again, areas they talked about: data interoperability, which I think is a common theme, multiple users of data. Data's collected and it's recollected and it's used again. Why? The climate, obviously the climate, COP26, etc. We all understand the pressures that we're under there. Biodiversity, talked about soil health, organic, the regen and organic, maybe perhaps getting closer together. Tillage and tillage developments over the years, and the input costs. I mean, it was, mentioned, I think it possibly was Rob that mentioned that 22% agflation, which is putting so much pressure on the cost side of agricultural businesses at the minute. It was mentioned about the labour shortage, and again, that's across getting multiple exposure across different areas of production now, not just the headline seasonal workers. And obviously, economic sustainability of overall else. We want to see economically viable farming business units in the future. So a lot discussed there. I'll do a little bit of a shout out for Rob. I think it was again. I know that Jake and John, etc., had great inputs, but one of my humorous take homes was the genetics piece on his Romney sheep, and the Jeremy Kyle reference to the parentage, which I found quite good. Moving on to the second session, and the reflection of that was against our survey that we published recently, and we may publish some more aspects of that, which was pan-UK, so all 4 nations involved in extracting data from that survey across all farm types. And I'll not go into the detail of the stats, it's on our website, but that was the backdrop. And we talked about, again, interoperability, standards and ownership of data being key challenges. Jose summarised them very well. Mark then laid down the challenge, in effect, that we need someone to lead that data integration process. Can we leave it to the private sector? Can we get actors around the table to at least discuss in obviously a commercially sensitive environment, but obviously collegiate and collaborative? Because if the value of that data is not fully extracted from the farming point of view, you're not getting the best benefit of the agri-technologies that are deployed, and that's what we're looking for. So competition, but also collaboration. Tech can obviously improve farm businesses. We had some examples of that. And again, and this came in from the comments section again, improving usability and ease of use, making it farmer sector centric. And don't just focus on the monetary benefits. There are ease of use benefits. There are other benefits from technology, lifestyle, etc., which I think come in from some of the comments. Jean-Pierre mentioned about de-risking decision-making from the technical provider point of view. Perhaps the risks might even be perceived as being less than actual farming. The variables in farming much wider. Can that risk be shared more? Now, then moved on quickly to net zero, and Jean-Pierre again mentioned about future carbon markets, the voluntary carbon schemes, how they actually may play a part in the tech for future of ag. Might it be actually that the people on either side of that equation actually provide the funding in order for that to happen, and the farmer benefits by getting the data that he needs for his business? And perhaps there might be in future sequestration credits in carbon, etc., that might be a revenue stream for farmers in future. This is very early stages yet, but that might be something that's an additional revenue stream. Talked about regen ag and environmental concerns, carbon farming and general precision farming, and Mark reflecting on his 30 years of knowledge, and I've known Mark for a number of years, and he keeps challenging me regularly. And then we went over to the final session, which was looking at the areas of opportunity for innovation in the transition plan. How can we protect agri-tech innovation? The policy regulation around that, how do we take solutions to market, etc., etc. And that was a very fertile discussion, and I'm thankful for obviously Tim coming back into that space again and articulating some of the new developments in policy and funding mechanisms that might appear in the near future. Bryn et al. For the legislative changes and the IP around that, and IP protection is critically important for protecting novel ideas. There was discussion on training and skills needed as well. And I think there's obviously a number of other points that were made that I've probably skipped gaily through, but I think everybody would have picked up things that may be of use to them. And certainly in the chat, lots of people putting in their email addresses, etc., to get contact. So that was really good. Moving on to the kind of the overall sum up, I think I'm just going to say thank you all the delegates, and I'm astonished and humbled by the number of people who have attended this conference today, and all those obviously who took an active part in the panel sessions. Tim and Steve for their inputs, and reflecting back to my own team, Elliot, Trish and Claire for chairing the panels. And a little bit of a shout out, in fact, a big shout out to Annabelle and Tom, who you didn't see in the background, for choreographing the whole conference. I think Annabelle might be lying in a dark room later on today. And another shout out for another organisation that I haven't mentioned today. So it's worth noting the role of Innovate UK in assisting to deliver both the DEFRA initiated schemes, but also in truth, funding Agri-EPI, the other Agri-Tech centres, in our role in supporting this community. And again, a final reflection from me, I suppose. One of my take-homes from the outcomes of today focused on greater collaboration between all the actors, the farmers, the tech, the supply chain, the large cos, etc. And Trish did prime me for this, just a shout out for Agri-EPI Centre. Our role is to foster this and develop solutions for the farmer with the Agri-Tech community we serve. So please reach out to ourselves, our people, and we will do our best to help. We already have nearly a couple of hundred industry and stakeholder members in our community already, and happy to bring in more, speak to Annabelle. So finally, again, thanks for your contributions today. Look forward to next year's conference and perhaps a bit of face-to-face rather than virtual, and reporting progresses from the challenges that we've laid down this year. I think that's really important that we move on and we take the learnings and we take the messaging that we've got this year and we try and transform that into actions from our perspective to better the community that we serve. So that will be our homework thereafter. So I'm finally going to push back or get back to Annabelle and let you know about our forthcoming or imminent in time, I'm probably running behind time actually, our Agri-Tech Expo event, which is about to commence. So I'll stop waffling, Annabelle, and hand back to you.
Thank you, Dave. That was excellently summed up as well. So yeah, really great to have you finish up and wrap up for us today. So just want to finally just talk about Nevernex powered by Bosch. So thank you for them as well as our event partners. You can find more about that open source platform in the expo, which will be starting now. So that works. You can network throughout the day. It will be open up until 3 today, and you can view some of the companies that have got their technology on display. You can also watch the recordings back. And again, we just want to thank you for supporting the conference this morning and being involved and just being part of the journey of getting Agri-Tech on farm. So we're going to finish with our video that we started with to play out to. So thank you, everybody.
The conference this year is focused on the path to sustainable farming. There are two huge challenges for the sector at present, and they relate to primary producers, farmers. The first is the transition in the current support schemes that could have a significant future effect on farm businesses. The second is the environment and sustaining this, both in terms of limiting greenhouse gas emissions and also preserving and enhancing the biodiversity and natural capital.
Her Majesty's Government will now invest and support farmers to improve the environment, improve animal health and welfare, and reduce carbon emissions.
So we're focusing on this because it is absolutely key to everything. Sustainability isn't just one person's problem, it's all of our problems.
So sustainability is really important to all businesses, but that can look different, and the route that farmers take to get there will be different for everybody.
We are quite a long way down the path as far as sustainable farming is concerned. There are still some big gaps there, and I think that's where Agri-Tech can come into play.
So to be able to do that, we really do need to have the precision Agri-Tech developed to help improve that sustainability.
And at the end of the day, everybody needs a farmer 3 times a day. Breakfast, lunch, supper, tea. So that's not going to go away. We could be a hell of a lot more efficient than what we are at the moment and stop all this importing of food from further afield. We're under pressure at the moment from transport, fossil fuels, you know, the list goes on and on and on.
I see there's loads to do. You know, it's understanding your ecosystem, your soils, what's possible, what's not possible, trying to evolve and improve and leaving things better than we found them.
Sustainability is about farmers being more collaborative, so the arable men are going to really need to look at the livestock guys, use cover crops, use catch crops, all these things for the health of their soils.
A huge part of the future and a vital step is improved data management and collection, more targeted applications of inputs, say fertilizers, pesticides.
Can we get some of this data joined up? It's no good getting this information if you can't interpret and make use of it. If we can utilize that better, that's a big win for the whole industry and resources as well.
First of all, there's a mindset change, isn't there? Like actual people sitting down and sort of changing, oh, actually this, I should be farming this way differently, or I should be farming considering other things.
In order to deliver technology to the farmers, it's key to listen to them.
We need to keep speaking with the people who are developing all this technology.
Because only with their feedback, we will be able to help them reduce the complexity in their day-to-day life.
And there needs to be more communications for practical people on the farm to get their message across and what they want and what they want to see.
I think the key to sustainable farming from a technology point of view is we need to solve the problems of compatibility, connectivity, and interoperability, or on a more down-to-earth level, we just need to make sure that tech is simple and that it is easy to integrate into a farmer's day-to-day life.
And that is the role that Agri-EPI has, and these are some of the areas that we will be addressing at our conference this week.
It's about making agriculture easier for us, managing what we do. If it speeds the process up, if it makes definitive decisions on our budgeting, helps our profitability, sustainability, the environment, it's a win-win situation.
In terms of really catching on, it needs to be financially beneficial, because let's be brave here, farms need to be trading in 5 years' time for you to actually implement any changes to allow you to kind of do more sustainable.
But there's lots of good people doing really good innovative things.
You can't be profitable without investing in environmental areas, and whilst investing in environmental areas allows you to become more financially sustainable also.
We're turning cereals into cattle production. Waste from the cattle is going back onto the arable side, reducing our fertiliser inputs, cover crops, catch crops, green crops for soil health. We're doing lots of good things to get the correct genetics onto the UK farms.
The great thing about Agri-Tech is providing the little tweaks which help us do what we do better.
But we need to do more with regards to coming together within the supply chain.
The key to unlock successful innovation is to bring appropriate parties together and find new ways of making it happen. This conference is a step along the way of this journey.
Agri-EPI will work with farmers and the supply chain and connect with the UK academic brilliance, but also bringing in the ag-tech community as well.
We see value in being part of this community because Agri-EPI Centre is one of the key Agri-Tech centres of innovation in the UK, and that helps us to connect with the right partners, farmers, technology providers.
And we work together to solve the real problems for farmers today to bring together sustainability goals.
There are challenges ahead, but I think there will always be solutions that ensure we have a robust and resilient food production capacity, delivering for multiple objectives. I would like to thank our main conference sponsors, Bosch and Nevinex, and also I'm delighted that Tim Mordan, the Deputy Director of DEFRA, is providing our keynote today and will give some really interesting insights in the future in terms of farm innovation for the UK.